I am Chair Pierina Sanchez, and I'm going to turn on the microphone. I am Chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings, and I want to thank you all for joining today's hearing to examine the city's enforcement of the Housing Maintenance Code, and also hear from a number of colleagues on bills related to this topic. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from the City Council who are present, Councilmember Marte, Councilmember Hanif, Councilmember Aviles, Councilmember Hudson, and Councilmember Holden, and Councilmember Caban. To start this hearing, I wanted to share about a constituent that we have in our office. She has lived in her building for decades, and her apartment building is inundated with B-class and C-class violations, ranging from lacking heat and hot water to mold. Since December 2021, she and her neighbors have made numerous complaints to 311, prompting inspections from HPD to address these issues. Sometimes the agency is able to send inspectors, and sometimes the constituents feel ignored. When agency inspectors eventually do come to their home, the landlord will remediate the issues, and the issue may be corrected for the night or for just a few days. My constituent then again calls 311 for the same issue, and when they're met with no response from HPD, they have finally turned to my office to escalate. This year alone, my office has addressed a total of hundreds of complaints related to landlords and building owners who are neglecting their duty to take care of their buildings. This one example had 76 calls made to 311 over a 12-month period, with 55 total violations issued to said building, and yet repairs not completed. Recurring complaints and violations are more than just anecdotal. All too frequently, council members, advocates, city agencies respond to thousands of housing quality complaints, ranging from lack of heat to pervasive mold to gas and electrical outages. A 2020 report by the New York State Comptroller, however, tells us of a building, another example, that received 175 calls from tenants issuing 311 complaint calls, but not a single inspection was conducted in this building, and certainly no violations were issued. So despite HPD's gargantuan task of conducting 500,000 annual inspections, far too many New Yorkers still feel that they remain in substandard housing. This is a critical reality, as these violations impact the health and wellness of our tenants, our community, and our environment. It's not lost on us the relationship between health outcomes and substandard housing conditions. As we know, the social determinants of health begin with a healthy home. Throughout the years, the city has made great strides in enforcing the city's housing maintenance code. The council has enacted legislation to remedy violations impacting our communities, including Local Law 18 of 2020, establishing the Heat Sensor Program, Local Law 1 of 2018, creating the Certificate of No Harassment Pilot Program, Local Law 117 of 2019, requiring HPD to audit 15% of certification of correction of Class C violations, to name a few. Yet while these programs provide the city one of the most robust set of enforcement tools in the state of New York, their efficiency is often unknown or insufficient. The live stream is not up yet, so you're going to hear that again. Maybe not. I was wondering, since we're not on camera, like, y'all want to just tell me how your weekend was? No. Hi, HPD. Thank you for being here, and DOF and DOB. So good afternoon. I won't repeat all of the testimony, all of my opening statement that I've already read, but I do want to acknowledge the council members present, Councilmember Marte, Hanif, Aviles, Hudson, Holden, Felice, and Carr. Sorry, and Councilmember Kagan and Caban. So to continue, while these programs provide the city with one of the most robust set of enforcement tools in the state of New York, their efficiency is unknown and perhaps insufficient, either in actual operations of the program, the overall cohesiveness in the way that they work together, or in the recovery of fines and fees. There are evidently points we need to address in ensuring the city's housing maintenance code, and when it is not enforced, ensuring landlords are held accountable, given the severity of the issues at hand. Today, we will assess tools at the city's disposal for enforcing our housing maintenance code and hold those accountable who in bad faith consistently ignore the stipulations thereof. I'll touch on these programs briefly, but at today's hearing, I want to go beyond the basic facts about the program. It is essential for the committee to carry out its oversight functions to learn whether these programs are working and ways that we can work together to improve them, all with the aim of making sure that New Yorkers feel safer in their homes. To begin, 7A. 7A allows judges in housing court to appoint property administrators when owners of a property have effectively abandoned their property, and the conditions of the property are dangerous to the life, health, and safety of the tenants. In fiscal year 20, 40 units were discharged from the 7A program or were in compliance with a 7A consent order, 23 in fiscal year 21, and 34 in fiscal year 22. I hope to hear from the administration about the success and state of the buildings in this program, under which circumstances HPD requests a 7A administrator, and how a building can successfully exit the program. Alternative enforcement. The Alternative Enforcement Program requires HPD to perform frequent inspection to a select number of buildings in the City of New York, track correction of violations, issue orders to correct if the owner fails to act, and make repairs as necessary. In fiscal year 20, there were 1,256 units discharged from the Alternative Enforcement Program as a result of owner compliance, 6,484 units in fiscal 21, 4,135 in fiscal 22. Our data shows that 386 buildings have gone through the Alternative Enforcement Program more than once. If a building has gone through AEP once and somehow becomes eligible to enter it again, we need to revisit the Alternative Enforcement Program to see, are there property owners who are repeatedly failing to properly maintain their buildings at the expense of the safety of the tenants? The Certificate of No Harassment Program. Local Law 1 of 2018 established a pilot program requiring owners of certain buildings to obtain a certification of no harassment before filing for permits at the Department of Buildings to perform certain construction work. The CONH program aims to ensure that buildings do not harass tenants when they seek to conduct alterations or demolition work. What is unclear is how many certifications of no harassment have been issued since the pilot program began, and whether the program has increased or decreased the number of harassment complaints from tenants. Emergency repair. HPD has the power to intervene and correct emergency violations via the Emergency Repair Program when a property owner fails to act. There were 363,480 dwelling units in fiscal 20 that had emergency work completed under ERP, but only 40,547 units in 21 and 42,039 units in 22, likely because of the pandemic, I'm sure we'll hear. Further, our data shows multiple buildings undergoing ERP a few times, with one building going through the program 80 times. Further, I'm concerned with owners' abuse of this program in their efforts to shirk their responsibilities to tenants. I'm interested to hearing from the administration how the fees associated with the emergency repair program how many go unpaid, and how many become liens against the property, with both HPD and DOF's enforcement protocols during these procedures. HPD's latest report on the Alternative Enforcement Program shows that over $100 million, including interest, has been recouped through the program. Of this, $40 million were ERP charges, $53 million were AEP charges, 18 million of those for system replacement, and 35 million for emergency repairs and utilities. I'm interested in the total amount of charges imposed in addition to these recouped by the department. I'm interested also in understanding the collection rate of fees over the last several years and how HPD has improved collection overall, HPD and DOF. In 2019, the New York State Comptroller selected a sample of 25 complaint cases that resulted in notices of violation issued by the agency during the last 2 fiscal years, ending in June 2019. And of the 25 cases, 4 were dismissed after owners corrected the violations, and 21 were referred to housing court. When does HPD pursue litigation versus other alternatives available to the department? I won't go through all of them because I know that the administration will. There are other programs that the administration has access to, and the in sum, we want to look at each of these programs today and understand how the administration measures success. With respect to the legislation that we will be hearing today, I'll pass the mic to my colleagues to speak on the bills that they are having heard. And just to speak on my own, I, alongside 9 council members from the districts with the highest rates of complaints, introduced intro number 204, which would raise the inspection fees for repeat inspections as time and time again, heat and hot water complaints go unaddressed. I'm also sponsoring intro number 434, which seeks to expand the heat sensor program. The heat sensor program has proven to have some success since its adoption in the pilot phase, and it's worth expanding. We will also take a look at how the pilot program has fared and what we can do to expand and make it more effective. Intro number 163, sponsored by Councilmember Holden, relates to the photographic documentation evidencing certain violations enforced by HPD. Intro number 484 is sponsored by Councilmember Marte, which is the DOB analog to 163. Intro number 243 is sponsored by Councilmember Hanif, relating to multiple dwelling owners being required to post notices regarding electric space heater safety. Intro number 337 is sponsored by Councilmember Hudson, relating to HPD providing annual lists of open housing maintenance code violations to multiple dwelling occupants and tenants. And finally, 583, which is sponsored by the public advocate, who could not join us today, relating to an increase in penalties for violations issued by HPD and requiring HPD to maintain a certification of correction watch list and prohibiting any listed landlord from certifying correction of violations in multiple dwellings without an inspection. I would like to thank my team, Sam Cardenas, my Chief of Staff, Kadeem Robinson, our Legislative and Communications Director, as well as the Housing and Buildings Committee staff, Audrey Sun, Taylor Zaloni, Jose Conde, Charles Kim, Dan Krupp, and a special shout out on this hearing to our data scientist, Brooke Fry, who spent many, many hours analyzing open data records. And with that, thanks everyone again for being here today. I want to turn it over to my colleagues to make introductions about their bills. So first up, Councilmember Marte.
First of all, I want to thank Chair Sanchez for having this hearing and bringing this piece of legislation into the agenda. I also want to thank my Legislative Director, Ian Wong, and Rachel Cordero from Central Staff for making this bill possible. Intro 484 will require Department of Buildings inspector to take photos when they respond to tenants' complaint and issue violations. Right now, too often, our often receives calls and emails from constituents telling my staff that they still have their apartment issue unsolved despite multiple DOB inspections. They are unsure if the inspector even went into their building or spotted the correct conditions for repairs before closing the ticket prematurely. This bill intends to address this issue and brings more transparency and accountability to New York City tenants by requiring photographic evidence and maintaining such records so that public and local elected officials have the ability to make sure that DOB inspectors actually conduct the inspection and the job they're set out to do before closing any ticket. This is about bringing DOB and inspector into the 21st century. Right now, especially during the holiday season, anytime you receive a package and they leave it at your doorstep, a UPS, FedEx worker takes a photo. We all have smartphones. Even the instruments that many of these inspectors hold, whether it's an iPad or another tablet, have the ability to take photos. There's no reason why we shouldn't have this in New York City. We are mindful that this law does not add any additional burden or poses any challenges for DOB inspectors to conduct their job. Our office will continue to partner with the department and the commissioner to coordinate further rulemaking to ensure a smooth implementation of this law. Thank you again, Chair, for allowing us to have this hearing.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Marte. I next want to pass it to Councilmember Hanif.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez and the Committee on Housing and Buildings for hosting this critical hearing. I deeply appreciate you including Intro 243A on today's agenda. Electric space heaters are one of the leading causes of fires. According to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, portable heaters are involved in about 1,700 fires per year nationwide, resulting in about 80 deaths and 160 injuries. The tragic Twin Parks fire in Councilmember Felice's district in January of this year showed how devastating these fires can be. Unfortunately, we know we cannot eliminate space heater usage in our city. While landlords have an obligation to their tenants to provide adequate heating, this obligation is often not met and residents are forced to resort to using heaters to stay warm. Earlier this year, the council passed my bill, Local Law 64 of 2022, which prohibited space heaters without necessary safety features from being sold in our state. Intro 243A, which is being heard today, builds off of this legislation by making sure tenants know how to use space heaters safely. If passed, this bill would require building owners to conspicuously post an informational notice on how to properly operate a space heater. The notice would need to include the recommendations: 1, purchasing an electric space heater with the seal of a qualified testing laboratory, such as Underwriters Laboratories, Inc. 2, choosing a heater with a thermostat and overheat protection, including tip-over, automatic shut-off functionality. 3, operating the heater at least 3 feet away from anything flammable. 4, operating the heater only on a solid flat surface. 5, keeping the heater away from heavily trafficked areas in the dwelling. 6, never blocking a dwelling exit. 7, keeping children and pets away from the heater. 8, plugging the heater directly into the wall outlet and never using an extension cord or surge protector. 9, turning off and unplugging the heater when leaving a room or going to sleep, and 10 additional recommendations issued by the department. Since the bill was introduced, I've added amendments with the assistance of the Great Housing and Buildings Committee staff, Taylor Zeleny and Audrey Sun, to better ensure that our immigrant communities are able to receive this notice in the languages they speak. The A version being heard today ensures that the notice will be available in the 10 designated citywide languages, as well as additional languages. This legislation is a common sense approach that will reduce risk and save lives. I appreciate the sponsorship of this bill from 20 of my colleagues and strongly encourage others to sign on and for the council to pass it expeditiously. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember Hanif. We'll next go to Councilmember Hudson.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez, and good afternoon. Today, the Committee on Housing and Buildings will hear my bill, Introduction 337, which would require the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to compile and distribute by mail to tenants or occupants of a multiple dwelling a list of any unresolved violations of the Housing Maintenance Code for such dwelling once a year. I introduced this bill after speaking with countless tenants who reached out to my office because their landlord failed to address the myriad violations in their units, similarly to Chair Sanchez and the constituent cases that she's referenced. These tenants wanted evidence to prove unaddressed violations and to be able to use such evidence as leverage to force their landlords to fix these issues as quickly as possible, and this bill does just that. Further, we need to arm tenants with the tools they need to fight against excessive rent increases by greedy landlords. One way to fight the rampant displacement we've seen in my district is for longtime tenants to be able to negotiate lease renewals with their landlords in a way that mitigates high rent increases. Being equipped with outstanding housing maintenance code violations in their unit would allow tenants to fight back against attempted unjustified rent hikes. While this information is readily available on the city's open data and HPD's building registration and violation portals, most New Yorkers know neither about the existence of these sources nor how to use them. Though we should of course continue investing in making our city's data more accessible for all, we should also provide this data proactively in a digestible, easy to understand format. And I want to say thank you to Chris Pepe for drafting this bill, as well as to my Chief of Staff, Casey Addison, and my Director of Policy and Budget Initiatives, Andrew Wright. And thank you again, Chair Sanchez.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hudson, and I hope you feel better soon. We'll next go to Councilmember Bob Holden.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez, for hosting this hearing today, all the great bills that are being heard, and of course, including my bill, Intro 163. Intro 163 would require the Department of Housing, Preservation and Development, HPD, to submit photographic documentation when issuing a notice of violation. HPD would also be required to publish a list of violations subject to this requirement on its website. We certainly need transparency and consistency when any government agency issues a violation. My bill would make it easier for building owners and tenants to understand why they are receiving a violation and what has to be done to remedy the situation. Again, I want to thank the co-sponsors of this bill and all the bills that are being heard today, the sponsors, and look forward to hearing testimony today from HPD and the public. And again, thank you, Chair Sanchez.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Holden. I'll now turn it over to our committee counsel to administer the oath.
We'll now take testimony from the administration. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Excuse my voice. I'm recovering also from a little respiratory. Good afternoon, Chair Sanchez, and members of the Housing and Buildings Committee. My name is Anne Marie Santiago, and I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services at the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I am accompanied today by the leadership of the enforcement team, Marty Weithman, Assistant Commissioner of the Housing Litigation Division, Grace DeFina, Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Special Enforcement, Joshua Cucchiaro, Assistant Commissioner of the Emergency Operations Division, and Renee Piet, Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Neighborhood Preservation. Mario Ferrigno, Assistant Commissioner of the Division of Code Enforcement, and Angela Robinson, Assistant Commissioner of the our Administration and Internal Compliance Division, unfortunately could not be with us today. Thank you for the invitation to testify on our enforcement of the Housing Maintenance Code and several bills proposed by the City Council related to our enforcement of that code. The mission of the Office of Enforcement and Neighborhood Services, which we share with the Council, is to protect the quality of housing for all New Yorkers. Each of us here today represent a dedicated team of field and office staff who work throughout COVID to keep New Yorkers safe, conducting inspections in response to complaints, re-inspecting open violations, both to ensure that building records reflect repairs and to ensure that landlords who did not make repairs continue to be held accountable for those conditions, seeking enforcement of orders and educating owners. We continue to provide our basic services, such as restoring heat when property owners were unable to or refused to do so. At the same time, we implemented a number of new laws, rules, and common sense procedures designed to improve the safety for our families and protect tenants from harassment. We continue to find new and innovative ways to fulfill our mission despite the challenges faced by all city agencies over the past 3 years. I know that all of you have interacted with our services on behalf of your constituents over the past year, but I would like to share some important statistics and highlights from the past 3 years to bring some context to our work. In fiscal year 2022, code enforcement received 580,000 complaints and conducted over 700,000 inspections and re-inspections of existing violations. For code enforcement activities specifically, almost $1 million in inspection fees was assessed and billed to properties through their property taxes. We implemented multiple changes regarding lead-based paint that expanded the number of households protected by our lead-based paint laws, including more audits and the issuance of violations for lead paint hazards at lower levels of lead in paint. We enhanced our work around fire safety, implementing new laws, posting a new multi-language notice whenever we issue a self-closing door violation in a building, sending more details about how to ensure that self-closing doors are working properly in owner and tenant notices that are mailed after a violation is issued, and educating owners on the need for fire safety notices in each apartment. Overall, during fiscal year 22, we completed emergency repairs that affected more than 42,000 apartments, restoring heat, addressing lead or mold, repairing self-closing doors, and fixing collapsing ceilings. We have used all of the tools at our disposal to enforce the code. This calendar year to date, we selected another 250 buildings for the Alternative Enforcement Program. We recently issued underlying condition orders to more than 70 buildings where mold and leaks are systemic. We now have almost 100 buildings in the heat sensor program, and our anti-harassment unit conducted inspections in over 600 buildings. We continue to file cases seeking orders to correct violations and access warrants to the extent possible based on the court's capacity in fiscal year 21 and return to court in person when they reopened last fall. In fiscal year 22, we closed cases which affected over 5,500 dwelling units with orders to correct and civil penalties where warranted. Over 61,500 violations were closed through our litigation actions. We obtained orders and civil penalties in cases related to lead-based paint compliance and against owners who have harassed tenants through the deferral of maintenance and deprivation of essential services in buildings across the city. Our litigation activity additionally extends to seeking orders and penalties in heat and hot water cases, obtaining access warrants when property owners refuse our emergency repair program, and working on the certification of no harassment program, including the pilot program which was renewed and expanded by the council last fall. In our efforts to ensure that tenants know their rights and ensure that property owners comply with the law, we have held 11 lead-based paint and mold webinars with almost 2,000 participants. We also conducted over 50 outreach events with the fire department on fire safety issues and with 17 different council members in your districts. We have started using a new customer service technology that allows property owners and tenants to make appointments with our property registration unit and our borough office code enforcement offices to discuss multiple topics. Appointments can be in person, via telephone, or via video conferencing. We have done all of this while making every effort to address our significant staffing challenges, which I mentioned in my testimony earlier this year. We have interviewed over 490 people for our housing inspector, technical field staff, and attorney positions. We have a new class of inspectors starting next week and plan to hold another job fair early in the new year. We are still looking to fill a number of vacancies as well in our Housing Litigation Division and our Emergency Operations Division. Commissioner Carrion has personally trumpeted this need far and wide at all types of events and interviews that he has participated in. HPD has continued to reach out to all types of constituencies who might be interested in working for us, including through expanded social media campaigns. As always, we ask for your support in these recruitment efforts, and we'd be happy to share all job descriptions with you and your colleagues at the council. We fully intend to take advantage of such opportunities in the future. Even given our limited resources at this time, we have plans to improve and expand some of our most important tools and services. In the Housing Blueprint, we committed to expanding the use of our anti-harassment unit, improving our technology even further to make interacting with the agency easier for tenants and owners, and improving our training to ensure our inspections and repairs are conducted by knowledgeable and professional staff. I would be happy to discuss all of these new initiatives with the council as we implement them over the next several years. Especially on the use of technology, I would like to take a minute to let the council know about the implementation of our real-time field force application, which began in 2019 and which continues to expand to more types of inspections and more units within our office. Our TFF currently allows our code inspectors working in our borough offices to start their day in the field for complaint inspections, improving productivity and allowing us to respond more quickly and efficiently than when we had to create routes in the office. We have rolled it out slowly, making improvements as we go to streamline our inspection data collection and are planning to expand to certification re-inspections sometime in 2023. We are planning to improve our public-facing information portal, releasing a new online application to view HPD complaints and violations, improving HPD Online in ways we trust will improve our customer service experience, obtaining building information. We have continued as well to expand our relationships with other city agencies, working more closely than ever with the Department of Health related to lead, pests, and allergen hazards, as well as working closely with other agencies, including the Department of Buildings, the Fire Department, the Law Department, the Department of Environmental Protection, and most recently related to the Rat Reduction Initiative, building stronger relationships with the Department of Sanitation. We continue to work with state partners as well, specifically the Attorney General's Office and Homes and Community Renewal on the Tenant Harassment Task Force. In terms of the bills before us today, I want to thank the council for their continued commitment to the tenants and property owners of New York City. We commend and support the goal of targeting agency enforcement to bad actors, including those who repeatedly falsely certify the correction of violations or repeatedly fail to address conditions for which violations are issued. We appreciate legislation that seeks to educate owners or tenants about the dangers that could be present in their homes. And understanding that these are the goals of these bills, we look forward to working on the details of the proposed legislation to ensure they can be implemented in a real and meaningful way. We do have some concerns about the bills to share. For Intro 204, we support the billing concept, but are not able to charge inspection fees for more than the cost of the service we provide. So we are working to determine the current cost of this service, which we will share with the council. Regarding Intro 243, we also support the goal of the bill and would look forward to discussing other ideas for more comprehensive and effective ways to communicate important safety information to tenants. On Intro 337, we want to make sure that everyone knows about HPD Online, the mechanism in place to provide information quickly and easily to the public. We are certainly open to discussing with the council how to make that information more readily accessible for New Yorkers who don't have internet access. For Intro 434, we want to ensure that the program continues to focus on only repeat offenders and does not have the unintended consequence of penalizing owners who address conditions that sometimes arise. We also have concerns around both the increase in staff and technology resources the bill's implementation would require. In addition, issuing violations without first undertaking an inspection of the premises may raise other concerns that are normally addressed when an inspector visits a building, including a census reading may not always reflect an apartment's temperature. The law department is reviewing the bill for concerns. Starting to issue violations not based on an inspector's observation is a slippery slope, especially when we are relying instead on technology that can be tampered with by both owners and tenants. But as we evaluate the results of our current heat sensor pilot program, we look forward to further conversations with the council about the most effective ways to address real issues around problem buildings. In regards to Intro 583, we support increasing penalties and restricting the privilege of certifications and the deemed complied process, but we need to work with the public advocate and the council on ensuring the process is simple and straightforward. We would also like to discuss some additional amendments that would strengthen HPD's ability to hold bad actors accountable. And finally, for Intro 163, HPD is opposed to this proposed legislation as it would require valuable technology resources, and we are not aware of issues related to contesting HPD violations that would be addressed by this bill. We hope to have further conversations around all of these efforts and to work collaboratively with the council to address your concerns so that we can continue to work toward the goal of providing quality housing for all New Yorkers. Thank you, and we would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Santiago. Very, very thankful for your comprehensive testimony. So it's almost the holidays, and it should be a happy time for New Yorkers, but the reality is that we know every single year heat and hot water complaints spike at this time. And, I'm looking over at Councilmember Feliz, who just, when we were 9 days in office, faced the biggest tragedy that the Bronx has seen in decades with the Twin Parks Northwest fire caused by a space heater. So the first question that I want to ask is grounded in that. Heat and hot water complaints, heating in particular, is one of the most pernicious, consistent complaints that we have all across the city. And yet a heat map of these complaints shows us what we unfortunately expect to see, right? That the heat complaint volume is concentrated in the lowest income communities of color, just time and time again. And so the first question is, just a general one from the perspective of the administration. What efforts has the administration taken, and what changes have been made since January of 2022 to address the persistent heat and hot water complaints, those buildings that are repeat offenders and are the agency is receiving calls for time and again?
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. So one of the ways we have addressed those buildings, right, is of course, as I mentioned, through our technology, we're making efforts to improve the speed at which we can respond to complaints. We do also have in place some processes for identifying buildings that have a particularly high number of complaints. And our Division of Neighborhood Preservation, which we may talk about later, attempts to contact tenants from those buildings, contacts owners, follows up whether or not violations are issued to try to get a sense of what the conditions are at the building. We do have inspectors in all of our borough offices that respond to the complaints. We also have a team that may go out towards the evening to respond to tenant complaints as well. Of course, we monitor the issuance of heat violations, and we expedite that through our emergency repair program. And we may have time later as well to talk about how that process works, where as soon as the violation is issued, within a very short time period, we are reaching out to the owner, we are reaching out to the tenant. And then we follow that up with a field staff visit, assuming that the temperature is low in the apartment.
Thank you for that. And from your perspective, you have inspectors that walk into every single one of these buildings. What is the cause that you can see for why buildings or owners do not provide this heat and hot water? Is it what tenants think, which is just saving money on oil or gas or whatever the case may be? What are some of the different causes that you see, and how can we address some of those?
I'm sure that there are council member property owners who fail to provide the service as a way either to save money, as a way to harass tenants, but I do not believe that that is the majority of the cases. I do believe that there are situations that happen where boilers break down, they're only machines, where fuel deliveries fail to get made because of human error, right? I don't think that the majority of buildings don't provide heat maliciously. I think we took a look at the heat violations that were issued last year, and about 75% of the buildings that had a heat violation only had one, right? Which would kind of indicate that it is not, for most buildings, it's not that there's a pattern of failure to provide heat. And so, we do have the heat sensor program, which we're still evaluating about how effective that is. We do have inspection fees related to properties where heat is not adequate multiple times. We can go into housing court, and we do, on those property owners who have multiple heat violations, either over one heat season or over multiple heat seasons.
Do you, so it's helpful to hear that 75% of violations had only one violation. Do you track the cause of a no heat condition in a building?
We do not, and sometimes we don't know. The inspector is not really a boiler expert. He has to be a generalist, or he or she. And a lot of times, most of the correction is done by the owner before we have to be involved with that correction. And so we're not in a position to say. Obviously, the hardest cases are cases where the boiler just is not working for whatever reason, and those are the ones that often fall to us if there's no owner in the picture, if the owner can't afford to make the repair, and emergency repair needs to be involved. Those are often the hardest ones that we see. But in general, I think there's no way for us to know what the owner fixed before we got there or what condition was addressed in terms of making the repair.
And so moving to the heat sensor program in particular, so there's a pilot program, 50 buildings were chosen in the first year. of those buildings that complied with their selection into the heat sensor program, we did see improvements in the number of complaints that tenants were making and the number of violations issued, certainly over the previous year prior to involvement in the program. So can you speak to how you have seen the success or failure or gaps that the program has? And you mentioned that 100 buildings are now in the program because it's 50 a year, second year, that makes sense. But how do buildings exit the heat sensor program?
Thank you, Council Member, and it's good to talk about this program in particular, I think. So you're right, we did see an improvement in buildings where heat sensors were installed, but we also saw improvement in those buildings where no heat sensor was installed. So with a very small sample size of 50, it's hard to make a definitive statement that having the heat sensors reduce the number of violations. I think in some cases, owners were upset about having to install the heat sensors, and actually, in some cases, the owners said, it's okay that I installed the heat sensors because now you know that the heat is adequate. So it kind of was a mixed bag amongst those owners. Not all of the buildings did install the heat sensors as required, and in some cases, we initiated legal action against those owners. The second cohort of buildings was just selected in July, as is required. I think the discharge from that program is very difficult because it requires you to not have had not only heat violations, but violations related to the heat sensors themselves over the period of time. And so very few buildings have actually been discharged from the program because especially that first year, although we did a lot of outreach to try to get owners to understand what they had to do, they didn't comply in time. And so even if they eventually put the sensors in, they had that violation issued. That's something that would be great to discuss as kind of an outtake strategy for that program, which may have been overlooked in the original legislation. But I think what we really hope to do is look at this second cohort in connection with the first to try to get a better sense. It was also the COVID years, as I referred to them, when that first 2-year cohort was in, and that may have also affected both owners' ability to install the sensors and tenants' willingness to have the sensors, quite frankly.
That's helpful. Did it again. That is helpful, but we don't know what we would have to do a power analysis to see the statistical significance of it all, but those buildings that did comply improved more than the buildings that didn't comply. So, more to come. Yeah, I agree. I, of course, have a million questions, but I want to give my colleagues an opportunity before I continue with questions. So first, I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Marte.
No question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
DOB. For DOB.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there.
Yeah. So Councilmember Marte has some questions for DOB.
And Deputy Commissioner, before you give your answer, I'm just going to administer the oath again because I don't think we were able to capture your response earlier. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And sorry, just before you begin, I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Dinowitz.
Great. My first question is, are there any obstacles from implementing Intro 484?
Hi, Councilmember. How are you?
Good.
So we have similar concerns to the concerns that HPD raised with Intro 163, and those are primarily technological concerns. So currently, while we have the capability to print summons in the field, our inspectors have mobile printers. They don't have the capacity to print photographs in the field, so that's one of our IT concerns. So allowing them to do that would require perhaps equipping them with new equipment. A secondary concern we have is privacy concerns that we're still discussing internally, but sometimes our inspections involve the interior of someone's home, so their bathrooms, bedrooms, and other living spaces. And then finally, one of the additional concerns we had is how many photos would we, have to include? Sometimes one photo doesn't tell the whole story. So we don't want respondents to believe that they only have to correct what's viewable in a photo if it doesn't capture all the violating conditions that we're noting in our summonses. So those are just some of the concerns that we have with the bill.
Do you believe that adding photography and investing in the equipment will increase the efficiency of tickets getting done? Right now, I'm sure all of our offices gets complaints from tenants, even property owners, where DOB inspects or probably doesn't inspect, but their ticket closes with no change done. Don't you think this is worth the investment for, future generations as well?
So currently we have our buildings information system. So all of our complaints, inspections and violations, that's all publicly available through our website currently. So I'm not sure what instances you might be referring to where, we closed out a complaint and didn't issue a violation. Maybe we didn't see a violating condition when we showed up. So I think I'd like to explore that further with your office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, have you done any cost estimates of what this might cost if we do move forward with this legislation?
We haven't, but that's something we'd certainly look into.
Okay. I have a question.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Marte. So coming back, Deputy Commissioner, you mentioned that 75% of buildings only had one violation. Of course, that leaves us with the 25% of buildings who are having repeated violations. So can we touch on a moment on the legislation, Local Law 117, that passed in, I believe, 2020, which is requiring HPD to audit 15% of certificates of correction, and pretty consistently finding that 30% of these corrections are false. How can that be? And what are we doing as a city? What is HPD doing to improve the lies? These are folks who are not fixing conditions and saying that they are. What is the agency doing, able to do about it?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was off. So that is one issue that I think that particular group of violations we need to pay a little bit more attention to and think about how to deal with that. I think we do support, as Public Advocate Williams has, some new kind of program to penalize repeat offenders for false certification. I think we have some concerns about the implementation of the program as he designed it in the bill, but we're certainly looking forward to having conversations with him about a way to ensure that once we identify repeat offenders, we can take some action to stop them from continuing to do that and get violations closed. So that's a conversation that absolutely is on our agenda.
Thank you. And circling back to heat and hot water repeat offenders, what are some of the causes that you see that are more common in those situations where it's repeated failures?
And I think there are some small minority of property owners who are maybe doing this willingly and purposefully, but some of the things to consider are that a repeat offender could be a heat violation that's issued this week and next week, during which period the owner is still trying to correct the original problem. So that is one. A second is that the repair that's made is actually insufficient, whether that's the plumber's mistake in judging how the repair needed to happen, or whether that's the owner trying to not invest what he or she needs to invest in order to repair it properly. So those types of situations do happen. Again, what percentage of that 25% is in any of those camps, I would only be guessing to say.
Would it be possible in certification of corrections to ask the owners why there was a heat outage, since we don't have that information from the city?
I would have to speak with our legal folks to answer that properly, I'm sure, council member. I'm not sure how we define what is required to be in that certification, but that's an idea that we can take back.
Thank you. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Feliz.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am Bronx Councilmember Oswald Feliz. Thank you, Chair Sanchez, for this hearing, and also thank you to all my colleagues who have bills today. So I have a few questions for HPD. Earlier this year, we had a hearing where we talked about our housing laws, enforcement of our housing laws, and also capacity to enforce them. And we talked about how many inspectors HPD currently has, and how many inspectors does HPD currently have funding for. And if I remember the numbers correctly, HPD had enough funding for about 450 inspectors, if I remember correctly, and it only had about half of that hired, about 250 inspectors. So I'm just wondering if we've been able to make some progress on that matter. So how many inspectors does HPD currently have?
If you give me one second, I do
Yep.
have that number here, sir, so
Thank
one
you.
second, please. Thank you for the question. Okay. Code enforcement. Here, okay. So we currently have 257 inspectors in the field or at our offices, and we have a little bit over 100 vacancies still. And again, as I mentioned to the chair at the beginning, we've made incredible efforts this year to try to hire. I believe we've interviewed over 500 people for our 3 most important titles. We're doing everything we can, including bringing on a new class of inspectors next week, doing a job fair in January. We've increased and improved on our outreach through social media, through any events that the commissioner attends, asking people if they have folks who they believe are qualified for these positions to please apply. We will take resumes anytime on a rolling basis. Happy to provide your office and every council member's office with the qualifications for that position. We are very actively recruiting.
How large is the class of inspectors that's starting next week?
15.
15. So, am I remembering the numbers correctly? We only had about 250 inspectors back in more or less March.
We had about 240 at the hearing before. And as quickly as we bring people on, because I believe we've brought on about 60 people, we've lost people in that same time period to keep us where we are today. So we are, again, actively doing what we can to not only recruit, but to retain staff.
So it's accurate to say that in the last 9 months, we've only gained about 20 inspectors.
That's correct.
Based on the realities of hiring, including the application process, by when do you think we'll get closer to 300 to 400 inspectors?
Thank you, council members. So let me also say that at the same time, we are working with DCAS to talk about the job, the qualifications, to figure out an easier way to make sure that we can recruit qualified candidates. We've done some outreach to other city agencies as well who are looking to pair people with positions. And I think this continues to ramp up and ramp up. And we're hoping to continue to make progress, whether it's slow or not, but to also continue to retain people. And as we bring people in to offer the types of opportunities at HPD for advancement that will keep people with us. We did have, over the years, we have towards sort of an older workforce. And so retirements are amongst those people who we have lost. And I think we're getting to a place where we're going to see those numbers start to decline as well.
How long does it take to hire an inspector from the moment they apply to the moment they're hired, generally?
I unfortunately, Assistant Commissioner Robinson is my expert on personnel, and she was unable to be here today, but we can try and come up with some information for you on that specifically.
Do you have a very rough number, let's say 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
Yeah, we have pre-approval for these positions from the Office of Management and Budget, again, a partner in helping us to move people quickly through the process. So it is really about, once we do the interview, making very quick selections on who we want to hire. It's a relatively quick process to send that through our agency and over for approval. And then, of course, there's the process of onboarding and giving them time to, leave their old jobs and come to us. So I think we have done a fair job at streamlining that process.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just squeeze in one final question. How many inspectors do you need in order to properly enforce all of our housing laws, in your opinion?
I think that the number that we're budgeted for right now will take us most of the way there. And I think once we're there, we have to assess what more we might need. I think it's hard for me to say at this point that we would need more, because I can't tell you where that will get me. And things will change between now and then, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner, just following Councilmember Felice's thread on these hires, one thing that I've anecdotally heard from former HPD staff who have moved on is the difficulty with the agency's remote policies and not having flexibility with their families, not having flexibility in general, and pay has also been something that I hear a lot about. What changes has HPD been able to make to positions to make them more attractive? I'm allowing you to make a PSA.
Thank you for that, Council Member. The issue of remote work is not really an issue for our field staff. There is no ever remote work option for housing inspectors. They need to be in the office. They need to be in the field. Throughout COVID, they were in the field when everyone else was home. For our particular work, it's very important that people are present and people are willing to go out to the field. So while that can be an issue for the city in general, I think it's very difficult for me to talk about that as an issue affecting our ability to retain, because it will never be that we're going to do remote. An inspector has to go and see a condition, observe it him or herself, to be able to testify to it at some later point if necessary, that the condition existed, and to verify the presence or absence of a housing maintenance code violation.
Have we seen an increase or decrease in the vacancy rates of inspectors since the last time HPD reported on it in March?
Can you clarify that question, Councilmember?
So there was a 36% vacancy rate of inspectors and 33% vacancy rate among inspectors and supervisors in March 31st of 2022. Just wondering if there's been any change over the past 9 months.
Yes, we have increased the staff, as I said. In response to Councilmember Felice, we have increased inspectors, and we have promoted a number of inspectors into supervisory positions during that same period.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Aviles before I continue with more questions.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to the HPD team for being here. I guess I was curious, following on the Chair's question, have there been any looks at the pay scale and ways to make the job even more competitive in the market?
Thank you, Councilmember. I think, right now, there's just in the city, there are negotiations that are going to happen between the unions and the administration, obviously, of which we're not a party to. But I'm sure that all of those things will be taken into account, not just for our agency and our staff, but for any staff like ours where they need to go to the field, They have a very difficult job, I'm sure you understand. Our inspectors need to not only understand the housing maintenance code, but they need to come in with some pre-knowledge about construction, and they need to have excellent customer service skills, which, you know, is often a challenge as well.
Yeah, I'd imagine that, often pay for city jobs is a huge barrier, right? We're competing against a private market that has significantly more resources or seems to be more generous in how they expend those resources. So I'm sure that's a significant barrier here.
We have, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Councilmember, just to finish that thought, you know, we have tried to make it clear to potential candidates the other benefits, though, that a city job does have, right? The pensions, the health care that often, at least in construction trades, maybe are not always, you know, par for the job. So highlighting that, we're also hoping to try and bring in some more candidates.
That's great. I mean, I think all of our offices collectively are part of your recruitment effort. I know we
And I appreciate
take
that.
those flyers out. Given that housing is New Yorkers' number one issue, right? Safe, dignified, affordable housing is the crisis of New York City. Making sure that HPD is fully funded to do that work is really critical, and the role of inspectors. I was curious about, fines and civil penalties, and how the agency both levies fines and civil penalties and collects. So if you could tell us how many of these fines and civil penalties have you levied? How much have you collected? How much have you forgiven? And for what reasons would you have forgiven?
Okay, Councilmember, sure, thank you. And this is an important part of our enforcement as well. So I am going to break it into 3 general categories of where we do collections, or collections are done for HPD activity, enforcement activity. And I will talk about 2, and then I will defer to our Assistant Commissioner for Litigation to talk about the last. HPD can bill a property for emergency repair work, right? And that would include whether it's done through our emergency repair program, whether it's done through our alternative enforcement program, it works the same way. We can bill a property for fees, which are imposed in special cases defined in the code, where basically around multiple offenders, where if you've had 3 inspections, 4 inspections for the same apartment or the same condition, the agency will levy a fee. For being in the alternative enforcement program, after a certain point, fees start to get levied against that property as well. That's the second category, fees. The third category would be for civil penalties, where in order to recoup penalties against a property for the violations, HPD would go to housing court and seek the civil penalties there. That would either result in a settlement or the imposition of a judgment by the court. The first 2 that I spoke about, the charges and the fees, on a regular basis, HPD prepares the records for these charges or fees, and we communicate them to the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance then adds those fees and charges onto the property's property tax bill. And the collection mechanism is really whatever collection mechanisms the Department of Finance has, which would include, agreements, payment agreements, if your property qualifies, which would include going into a place where the lien may be sold. In the past, when that happened, would be the overview, under the purview of finance, to ensure that those collections were done. For civil penalties, it's not the same process. It is not billed through the Department of Finance. So I will turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Weithman for just a minute to talk about how that happens.
So I guess before you
Yes.
jump in, do you have an amount of how much on an annual basis you have referred to DOF to collect?
Yes, we can provide the specific amounts. Generally, for emergency repair, And for emergency repair, it's about, I think, 10 million, I want to say, a year. I don't know if I had right, the dollars. We were prepared with some percentages, which we can talk about later, but we can provide the dollars to you. Basically whatever we spend on emergency repair, so if we have to, the agency has to do a repair on an emergency condition because an owner fails to do so, when we pay our vendor who has done that work, that amount, whatever that vendor invoices us for, plus an administrative fee, is combined and sent over for collection. And so the amount I would give you would be the charge that there's one charge that we sent over for collection, and there's a different charge of how much we spent. So I just want to make sure that we give you the correct numbers, so we can absolutely circle that back to you.
I'd love to know specifically,
Yes.
like, how much have been repaid on time? How much has been, if anything, gets forgiven? What is that process? Is there reasons for forgiveness in this respect?
So I'll stick again with emergency repair charges and fees. There is a process in the law that after we transfer those charges over to finance, the property owner has a period of time where they can protest the charge, and that's the term that's used. They can only protest the charge for a very limited number of reasons, the actual cost of the charge not being one of those reasons, right? So they can protest saying that they didn't receive notice that the charge was going to happen, or for fees that there was a reason and they need to provide evidence of that reason why they couldn't access the apartment to make repairs, for example. They submit those protests to HPD. We receive a very small number of protests every year. And of it, it's about less than 200 protests in the past few years. And we send over thousands of charges.
Right.
And less than 5% of those, 5% of those challenges, those protests have been upheld.
Councilmember Aviles, while you think on that, we did send these questions in advance, and many of these questions including ERP charges. And so I would love to get it on the record at this hearing, because we did send it in advance. And specifically just to put some detail on what Councilmember Aviles just asked, according to our analysis at the Council of Open Data, in 2018, there were 31.7 million was spent on ERP. 2019, 53.3 million. 2021, 59 million. 2022, 59.3 million. In 2020, that's not in order, but 40 million. So there's so much money that is being expended by the administration on this program for good reason. These are emergency conditions, Class C violations, but we do need to have an understanding of how much we're recouping of these charges that are being.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I do have the percentages. I just didn't have the dollar figures. So again, we can provide that specific information to you in the response as well. If you give me 1 second again.
Yeah.
Got my pages out of order. Okay. So the period of time we looked at for rate of collection, I think was the question, was 2017 through 2022 fiscal years. And so I'll go kind of one by one in categories and just give you a range. And again, the details will be in a written response to the council questions. As of October of 2022, 94% of the heat and hot water fees billed back in 2016 and 17 have been collected. For the most recent year that was billed, 2022, 66% of those fees have been collected as of, again, the end of October. For code enforcement inspection fees, and again, this pretty much is in the same range, a little bit less for AEP fees, but for code inspection fees for the 2016-2017 year or 2018, About 96% of what was billed has been collected. And as of the most recent year, 2022, 77% of what was billed has been collected.
And so what happens when you haven't collected from an owner?
So again, the collection process itself is overseen by Department of Finance, so they can provide more information about what the next steps might be in terms of pursuing collection.
Do those properties get tagged, and like does it overlap with potential violations? I would suspect if you're not paying your bills, you're probably also doing other things.
Well, that may be council member, I don't know. But HPD does do somewhat of an enforcement of the payment of fees by indicating that property owners can't get certain services through us if they don't pay their fees. So for example, if a property owner has open violations on their property, they would have to come to the Department they would have to come to HPD and file for what's known as a dismissal request inspection, for which they would pay for an inspector to come and re-inspect the property. If all of these fines and ERP charges and fees have not been paid, we reject that request until such time as things are paid. Now, that is not the ultimate collection,
Right.
Enforcement, but certainly we try to make sure that our outstanding charges are paid prior to providing a new service for a property owner.
Got it. So in terms of I realize I'm at time, but in terms of the other side of the ledger, I'm sorry, could you speak to those questions?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. As Deputy Commissioner Santiago explained, in order for HPD to obtain civil penalties, we must initiate an action or litigation in housing court. Once we do have a judgment, our Housing Litigation Division does have a judgment enforcement unit, which takes over those judgments, and they have a whole process and a number of tools at their disposal to identify assets of the debtor, and they seek to find the money. They of course try to resolve the issue with the owner, but if the owner is not willing to pay the judgment, we do have tools to try to find those assets.
Are the judgments reflected in the balances that the council member noted earlier, or those are just in collection?
The civil penalties are separate from the
Okay.
fees, yes.
Okay. Do we have a sense of how much is outstanding in civil penalties?
So if I can just give some more background on civil penalties, the way civil penalties work is, often in the course of a trial or a settlement with the property owner, if civil penalties are imposed, there's usually a time schedule set for the payment of those civil penalties. And generally, I believe we have good compliance with the payment of those civil penalties. One of our outstanding issues, issues is not really the right word, but is that a lot of times when we go to court, if an owner does not appear in court, a default judgment is assessed, right, for the maximum penalties because the owner did not appear. That kind of goes on our books as a outstanding open charge, but in reality, when the landlord eventually does appear, oftentimes they will go back to court and seek some reduction of that amount because they will size it to when the conditions were actually corrected. And so, what is a $2 million default penalty may wind up being a much less actual penalty when they come to court and they make their case. So we try to look at the amounts really that are not paid as not part of a default penalty, and we didn't prepare those numbers for today, but we can certainly take a look at that, council member.
Great. I just have one last thing, just switching topics as is our way. Just really quickly, something in our district that has recently come up, among many things, but we have a set of 7 buildings in our district that has applied for an Article 11 letter. Currently, 6 of the 7 buildings have no boiler. Apparently, their boilers that they've ordered and are trying very hard to get will not come in until 3 months, right? So we have a severe supply chain issue. The residents have tried hard. They've called our office. We have called your office multiple times, and we have not received any response. Obviously, we don't know how cold the weather is going to get, but 3 months without boilers is not okay, and it's an emergency situation. So I would love for your staff to follow up with us around how we can help these residents get access to a temporary boiler or, whatever remedy relief they can. They're working hard, but they're not getting responses from the agency staff. They keep calling.
Okay, if you can,
thank you.
communicate that information to me. I'm
Will do.
not aware of the specifics.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Thank you so much, Councilmember. I'd actually like to turn that into a question for the record. How, in extreme situations like that, I have several of those kind of cases in my district as well, where we're talking about a lower income building. We're talking about a building that, in Councilmember Avila's case, it's on back order. In other building situations, they just don't have the financing, but still remain responsible for their buildings. What is HPD's protocol to assist in these very expensive kind of repairs?
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll probably share this answer with our Assistant Commissioner for Emergency Operations. But as always, the process would be we issue a violation. We contact the owner to find out what's happening, if they're going to make the repair. If we go out there to the building and we see that there's no boiler, that's a pretty stark situation. That doesn't happen that often, thank goodness. But certainly we would assess the building for what the appropriate action is. And that could be one of a number of scenarios. So let's talk about, I guess, the good scenario first, where the Emergency Operations Division can make some assessment that would move the building in the right direction. And then we'll, obviously the most extreme, and I don't want to jump to the most extreme version of that, right? But if this is and again, I don't know the specifics of your situation, but if the boiler is so specialized that there is no other option but to wait for this special order, a vacate order may be warranted and issued. I can't, again, not knowing the details, I can't speak to that, but that is very rare occurrence that it becomes something so extreme. So assuming that it's not in that realm, I will turn it over to the Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you, Emery. So in cases like you describe, if in fact the building is compatible for a mobile steam unit, we do have on-call contracts available with contractors who can produce that type of unit to provide temporary heat and relief for the tenants of the buildings. Simultaneously, we would look at a long-term solution if the owner was unable to do so independently or was being uncooperative with the repair that's necessary, or the replacement in this case.
Great. Thank you so much. So moving into questions about the specific programs that HPD runs, I want to start off with a statement that just to the public, to whoever might be watching and might be facing these conditions in your building, first and foremost, call 311. Always call 311. It can seem like it's useless. It can seem very frustrating. The first step for us to have good information at the council and to work with the administration is having good data. So continue to call 311. Log it in via the app. It's just so critically important. Starting off with emergency repairs, and I'm going to go emergency repairs, then underlying conditions, then proactive enforcement, then AEP, litigation, 7A, and CONH. So starting off, so we're going to be here for a second, so bear with me. But starting off with ERP, emergency repairs are carried out by the agency when there are C-class violations that are hazardous to the health and safety of tenants. From the outside looking in, Deputy Commissioner, it is not straightforward to understand when the administration makes repairs, when the agency makes repairs, and when you don't. Certainly if the landlord is going to do the work themselves, they do it, but in those cases where the landlord is not acting, what determines whether HPD acts or not?
Thank you, Council Member. And so there are some conditions where in every case, HPD will act, or attempt to act, let me say. So a lead-based paint violation, a window guard, a self-closing door, we will always be sending someone to assess and, if possible, make the correction of the condition. And so, hopefully we have communicated to tenants that they should be on the lookout for another HPD staff member to come after the housing inspector comes. There are some cases, mold, can be a Class A violation or a Class B violation or a Class C violation, depending on the size of the mold as it's indicated in the law. And sometimes I think that can be confusing when it is either based on something like that, that's a square footage, or it's the discretion of the inspector. And we train our inspectors to understand when a condition is serious enough to warrant an emergency repair. When we are going to do an emergency repair, we send a letter to the tenant right after the violation is issued, at the same time, basically, that we send a notice to the landlord that the violation was issued. A notice does go to the tenant to say, HPD has identified that this condition warrants an emergency repair. Provide access to your landlord if they come to you to repair this. If not, HPD will be making an attempt, and we give them a telephone number to call to follow up with that.
So does HPD only go into a building when they receive that second call from a tenant?
No, that's not a call. No, I'm sorry. It just it helps the tenant contact us if they want to contact us, regardless of whether the tenant responds to that letter or not is irrelevant.
Okay.
It's really just to help the tenant understand what the process is.
So speaking about who is doing this work, so you have, in open data, you have this distinction between handyman work orders and open market work orders. And handyman work orders are conducted internally by the agency on certain kinds of repairs, with the vast majority of repairs being carried out by open market work orders. So what is the distinction? What gets done in-house by the agency? What is the staffing level of internal ERP operations, if you will? And then how much, what percentage, conversely, is open market work orders?
So for that answer, I'm going to defer to our Assistant Commissioner for Emergency Operations.
Thank you, Emery. Thank you, Councilmember. So with regard to open market orders, as you mentioned, the vast majority of ERP work is completed utilizing contractors who are awarded open market orders. For the smallest of jobs, we utilize the handyman work orders, and literally those are things like replacing a valve or installing a slide bolt and lock if necessary in certain situations as required. But again, the vast majority of work does go to contractors through the OMO process. Just in terms of contractors, just want to highlight that we utilize mainly MWBE contractors, and we generally, I think the median work order amount that's awarded to these small contractors is about $300 per OMO.
So I believe, shouldn't do this from memory, but I will. A 2020 audit by the controller found that HPD didn't have the proper controls in place to determine which open market contractors or vendors are utilized by the agency. So not maintaining updated lists, not removing folks who are unresponsive, issues like that. What kind of changes has the administration made since this controller audit?
Yes, so I think the controller's audit referred to our pre-qualified list, and that is comprised largely of the MWBE contractors that I referred to a few minutes ago. We've made a number of changes on the technology side of the world to help us sort of better track things, and we've also implemented some policy changes that sort of change the way we interpret responsiveness as allowable under the city's PPB rules.
Thank you. Moving back to the question of fee recovery with respect to emergency repair, when charges move over to Department of Finance, and Department of Finance is not here today, but they did receive the questions. I was told that you would have their responses. Department of Finance recovery of emergency repair charges, what do those percentages look like?
So those percentages are much lower than the ones that I gave you on the fees. From the 2018 period, as of today, we've collected about 63% of the emergency repair charges. And for the most recent fiscal year, it's 35%. I think, however, we're still working on these numbers with the Department of Finance because there are some additional caveats to keep in mind in terms of the collections from these periods. So in the past, as part of the tax lien sale, if money wasn't paid that was owed on particularly more emergency repair charges than fees because the fees are so low as compared to the emergency repair costs, right? If they weren't paid, they could be sold through the tax lien sale. And to get it, these numbers on collections is really just exactly that, what was billed and what was paid. It doesn't include what may have gone for further enforcement on collection with the Department of Finance. And so, again, we're working with them through the data to try and understand what that number would look like if you would consider the tax lien sale collections.
Got it. And we're not going to get into a hearing on the tax lien sale because that will occur in the future. I pretty much can promise. But looking at the question of those liens that go to DOF and face that highest level of enforcement, being the tax lien sale or third-party transfer or something else. Do you have that rate? How many unpaid violations or overdue charges end up going through one of those tax enforcement programs?
I don't, and again, that's under the purview of the Department of Finance, and so I think that will be something we'll have to work with them to understand. I think from our perspective, the fact that we've done the emergency repair work is our goal and is our mission. And we understand that they are the experts at tax collection and working with you all to make sure that, if we provided a service at the building for the tenants, the owner might not appreciate that service, but we made that repair, that the collections are going to happen appropriately.
Okay. It is a frustrating thing to hear because I specifically asked Department of Finance to share this because it's important for this council to understand. It's important for the council and the public to understand how our programs are working. We're not going to get into the tax lien sale and third-party transfer. We have goals regarding those programs. Reforming those programs are about protecting home ownership and about protecting those who are vulnerable to losing intergenerational equity. However, we do need to get to the bottom line of are buildings using ERP as their handyman, right? Are buildings abusing the system? And so that let me just ask it plainly in that way. 62% collection of 2018 charges, 35% collection as of this time. These are very low numbers, right? So folks are not paying their charges, and there are buildings that are going through ERP, using the ERP program multiple times, time and again. The vast majority don't. Not talking about those. Focusing on the bad actors. What do we know, and how are we preventing buildings from using the city as their handyman?
Right, and again, I think, Council Member, thank you for that question. I think that goes back to why we started with the Alternative Enforcement Program. That was really one of the, ERP is one of the criteria under which we select buildings for that program. And I think, we found some of those buildings are actually just abandoned. And that's why, a lot of the emergency repairs that need to happen fall to HPD to assist. And that can happen under a number of scenarios that doesn't implicate bad will. In some cases, property owners die and no one comes, and the estate is unable to care for the property properly to handle the management of a property. In some cases, the owner is not skilled enough to maintain the financial health of the property. I think that there are a plethora of scenarios that go into why this happens, and I think, through AEP is part of the way to weed some of those folks out, because once they do see the hefty fees that will be billed, they stop using ERP if that was their method of doing so before. And I think, as you said, we'll talk a little bit more about the AEP program specifically, but that is the one program amongst our enforcement programs that takes the expenditure of ERP into consideration when selecting properties.
So let's go to AEP. It's one of the programs. So just to start, and you will say better than I will. So can you lay out for us why was AEP created? These 250 buildings that are selected for AEP every year. What is their trajectory? How many of them are getting out before the 4-month period, and what is the trajectory for the rest?
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, I will just again give background, and then I will turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Defina, who oversees that program, for more of the detail around what we see there. So this program did start many years ago. We're currently in round 15 of the program, and every year basically we select another cohort of buildings for the program. As I just said, the program was initially created to really target buildings that not only were having a lot of violations issued, but were having a lot of emergency repair work done in those buildings in response to those violations, where clearly the owner was potentially using the city to do their repairs for them, or was really extending the time and the bad conditions under which the tenants were living. So at that time, we were selecting 200 buildings a year from rounds 1 through 7, and then AEP has been amended multiple times over the years, where we now select 250 buildings, and there are actually 2 separate criteria for the selection of the buildings. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Defina.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as Anne Marie mentioned, AEP, the goal of AEP was to get at repeat users of our enforcement activity. So we really wanted, an example would be the recurring leak. A landlord would just patch the leak, not make the underlying condition, not address the real need of the roof replacement. And it was that constant 311 call, HPD would write a violation, either the landlord or HPD would do emergency repairs, and then a couple months later, a couple weeks later, it would start to leak again. So the goal was to get at repeat users of our enforcement activity, and that's why the rules of the City of New York criteria for AEP include a ratio of B and C violations issued in the previous 5 years. So we're looking at recently issued B or C violations, as well as a certain amount of emergency repair charges. So for the smaller buildings, under 15 units, we're looking at $5,000 of emergency repair charges that we spent, whether you paid it or not. So that's where it's getting at people who might be using, landlords who might be using our ERP to address their building. Buildings get selected for the program. They get notice of the building, that they're participating in it, and they basically have 4 months to get their building discharged before being subject to roof-to-cellar inspections and inspection fees. In that 4 months, they need to correct 100% of their heat and hot water violations, 100% of all open mold C violations, which is the most immediately hazardous, 80% of mold B violations, 80% of vermin violations, and 80% of all other B and C violations. An owner that fails to do that is subject to a roof-to-cellar inspection in order to correct, where our staff will then tell the owner, you have to replace your roof, you have to replace the boiler, replace the windows, point the exterior. Whatever system is causing the violations is on the AEP order. It's posted at the building, it's mailed to the owner, it's filed with the county clerk's office as a lis pendens, and the owner then has an opportunity to do that. Compliance after that 4-month period includes correction of all the violations, the percentages that I mentioned before. In addition, they have to comply with the AEP order to correct. They have to pay whatever ERP balance is open at Department of Finance or enter into a payment agreement. They have to register their building, and once they meet compliance with that, they can get discharged. I mentioned it's fee heavy, so after the first 4 months, owners that fail to get out, in addition to being receiving an order to correct, they are charged a $500 per dwelling unit building inspection fee, and that's for the next 6 months of being an AEP, and it's for for the performance of routine inspections by AEP. So it's $500 per dwelling unit, and if the building remains in the program after 6 months, it's a second $500 per dwelling unit fee. So the initial inspection fee caps out at $1,000 per dwelling unit. They're also subject to complaint inspection fees, which is $200, and that's if a tenant calls 311, and as a result of that 311 call, we issue a B or C violation. It's $200 complaint inspection fee. They're also subject to a $100 false certification fee, which means if the landlord certifies correction of a violation and we inspect and we determine that it was falsely certified, it's imposed a $100 false certification fee. All the fees get billed through Department of Finance and become a lien against the property.
Got it. So thank you for laying out that background and context on how it works. So digging into how the program is working, I understand that there have been 386 buildings that have gone through AEP more than once. That's crazy, given this level of fines and fees and everything. So can you talk about the effectiveness of the program? How many buildings are actually paying these fees, after the 4-month period, et cetera?
So to date, we have 3,387 buildings have gone through AEP. It's 15 years old. Let me just see. We do have repeat buildings. The program, just to let you know, when program does receive the new list, we run the list every January 31st. What we do look at is to see how many of those buildings were in repeat rounds. It is possible, like repeats from this year might have been from 15 years ago, which, that's a big gap of time. We look at those repeat buildings, and as a program, what we do is to look to see if any ownership has changed. So sometimes it's a matter of, the old owner corrected it, but now it's a new owner. If ownership hasn't changed, we then AEP, under the statute, we have the ability to take immediate action, which removes that 4-month opportunity to get the building discharged, and we go right to issuing an order. So one of the things program looks at is it the same owner? Was it 15 years ago, or was it just a year ago? And also, we do a quicker inspection of the building to determine whether any system replacements need to get done. And if we believe system replacements need to get done, it's the same owner. It hasn't been that much of a big gap in time since being back in AEP. We have the authority to take immediate action. So then we send those landlords a notice basically saying we're taking immediate action and you're being imposed the fees right away. You're not having the 4-month period. Just another point for buildings that do get discharged in the 4-month period before fees and an order is imposed, those buildings that get discharged are monitored by HPD's Division of Neighborhood Preservation for at least 1 year. And the whole point of that monitoring is it's eyes on the building to make sure that if we see complaints, if we see violations start to trickle upwards, we could try to address it then.
That's very helpful. So my understanding is that there are a certain number of buildings that, again, they are bad and they are coming back into the program after a short period of time, not addressing system improvements, things like that. What are some of the tools that HPD has to sort of escalate on them? And specifically, if you could talk about, in relation to alternative enforcement, when does HPD pursue the 7A program?
So 7A is AEP is definitely a big referral source to 7A. And basically we want, especially if AEP is going to do work, if it's not, the building's not being managed, and that's sometimes the case. It's just that maybe, the building's not managed properly, there's system work. If AEP does the work, one of the reasons why 7A was actually put under the Division of Special Enforcement, which is the same division of AEP, is that we wanted to make sure that if AEP does the work, that we try to get a 7A administrator to protect the city's investment of the system work. AEP makes referrals to 7A. For 7A, 7A looks at a good referral for 7A, looks at conditions of a building. They have to be dangerous to the life, health, and safety. So you're looking at, really bad systems. A boiler might need to be replaced. Roof needs to be replaced. There's plumbing, leaks throughout the whole building. So the conditions have to be very poor. We also look to make sure that the building is occupied legally, that it's not illegally converted, because the 7A administrator's responsibility to do any work would be then to make sure that the work is done. To get permits, you need to have a building that's occupied legally with no illegal conversions. And a big factor is tenant support. If tenants are not willing to support the 7A, we can't bring it. So what the 7A unit does, the 7A unit at HPD is basically responsible for overseeing the 7A administrator who's appointed by the housing court judge. The 7A administrator basically steps into the shoes. They don't take ownership of the building, they just are responsible for managing the building. And 7A goes into the building before even referring a case to litigation. They talk to the tenants. We have a construction project manager, and we have community coordinators that meet with the tenants of a possible 7A building, explain the program, explain that, rent will have to be paid to the administrator, and then we ask if they support the building. We need at least 1/3 of the tenants to support a 7A case before we make the referral to go to housing litigation to get the 7A appointed. And that goes the same for any, outside group that refers a building to 7A.
So I've heard from advocacy organizations and individuals, desires to want to go through 7A because it is such a ramp up. So in what conditions, moving to 7A, when does HPD initiate? How bad does the building have to be for HPD to initiate 7A?
You need major system work and really dangerous conditions. So some examples of buildings that we've had, referred to 7A in the past were roofs need to be replaced, there's waste lines leaking throughout the building, no one's maintaining, the landlord walked away, there's no garbage pickup, garbage is piling up in the building, there's rodents throughout the building, raw sewage in the basement, the boiler needs to be replaced. So we look at a building holistically, and it has to have conditions dangerous to life, health, and safety, and then we make that referral. It has to have the tenant support. That's the key part too.
Got it. Why pursue 7A and litigation versus pursuing Department of Finance, tax enforcement action, something like TPT?
7A is the minute a 7A gets appointed, they basically step into the shoes of the landlord. If tenants are, paying rent, some tenants, we've had buildings where tenants were holding money in escrow, that money goes to the administrator, they could get, garbage collection, extermination services, front door locks, and violations get corrected right away. And then they would apply to HPD for a 7A loan to do the capital work, the major work.
Who retains the ownership of a building that has a 7A?
The owner still retains ownership, and in order for a 7A to be discharged, it would be up to the housing court judge to grant an owner's petition to discharge. Sometimes it's the existing owner, sometimes owners sell the property while it's in 7A, and it's a new owner who petitions the court to get the building back, control of the building back. And in the past, some buildings would go through TPT.
And I think, I'm sorry, if I could just add, Councilmember, Just because the building is in bad condition doesn't mean the owner isn't paying the property tax. So, and that is really kind of the worst-case scenario where the owner has some money to do something because they're paying the taxes, but they're not reinvesting in the property. And so tax lien enforcement is not really applicable in those scenarios. And so I think, and just to support Grace's point, right, our goal is to take the quickest route to getting the repairs done. The collection, even if there were taxes to be collected, collecting those taxes or those emergency repair charges are not going to get the conditions corrected for the tenants in a fairly quick manner.
Do you have a breakdown of that reality that you just mentioned, 7A administration, because there was no tax enforcement to be done, there were no arrears versus other, use of other programs?
No, we haven't done that analysis, council member, but we can look at the buildings that are in the program right now to see what their, tax liability is.
What are the incentives for those folks that decide to become administrators, to go through HPD's process? What is in it for them? Yep.
I think that is one of the challenges of the program. 7A administrators are paid based on the rent roll. And so the way that it works is I believe they get a percentage of what is collected after the basic repairs are done. So there is a challenge there for 7A administrators. Many of the administrators are in the business of tenant protection in some way. They work for an organization or are part of an organization that is looking to assist tenants in a bad place. And so they kind of have an imperative to participate. But as you can imagine, most of the rents in these buildings are fairly low to start with, and that contributes to why the owner has not done what they need to do. So that is a challenge.
Thank you. Just one more question that I forgot to ask on AEP. Do we have information about what tenant harassment might look like after a building goes into AEP, or have you seen cases of retaliation?
So you see buildings transfer, anti-harassment unit is, the inspection portion is within my division. You will sometimes actually see as a result of our anti-harassment inspections, we issue so many violations that the building will then be in AEP, which is a good thing if conditions that are dangerous exist. It's also common for AEP when they're doing their routine inspections to see harassment and make referrals to our anti-harassment unit, who then will call the tenants, and they do more of an interview. So we inspect, but we also speak to the tenants to see if the maintenance conditions are being used as a form of harassment. And you could see referrals, anti-harassment referrals from AEP buildings. Just like you could see a building go from AEP to 7A, all the units work very closely together. They're all related.
Okay. Got it, thank you. And just to flag, not for immediate response because it's a detailed, but I know of property 709 at 709 West 170th Street, 331 West 14th Street in Manhattan. The first one was in the Bronx. Examples of buildings who are seeking 7A administrators and have shared with my office that they've run up against barriers in connecting with the agency and having the agency move those buildings or help to move those buildings into the 7A program. Are these on your radar?
Can you repeat the first address, 709?
709 West 170th Street in the Bronx, 331 West 14th Street in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I don't know if 709 is an AEP or it's 705, 70. Yeah. So we're aware of both of these buildings and we're monitoring. The concern around 7A is also that there is an escalation of enforcement against those properties in order to make the case when we go into housing court to a judge that the building owner is not providing what they need to provide. And I believe, and I don't have the details of those properties, but the addresses are familiar to me, so we can get some more information to you, council member, about each of those properties.
Great. Well, look forward to that. Thank you so much. So moving to underlying conditions, and again, people who are watching this hearing, folks in the public, the goal here is for you to be familiar with all of the tools that HPD has at its disposal, and if you feel that your buildings needs to go through one of these programs that would help the conditions, email our office, call HPD, be in touch with the city so that we can work with you. I want to raise awareness around these programs. So underlying conditions, shout out to Councilmember Brewer, who created this program when she was a council member 15 years ago. But Councilmember Brewer created the underlying conditions program via local law to address persistent issues like mold and leaks, and to get at those underlying conditions. So can you talk about the underlying conditions program, and specifically what successes the agency has seen with UC?
Hi, again. So Underlying Conditions is a program within the Division of Special Enforcement. As you know, it was created in 2013, and the program was designed to target buildings that exhibit a high number of mold and leak violations. And the reason why we were looking at mold and leak violations is because it usually forms the basis of other violations. So it's not just mold and leaks, but it could also lead to collapsing ceiling, lead-based paint, pest infestation. The program's been around since 2013. We look for a percentage of apartments within a building that have mold and leak violations that would indicate that there's a problem with the building system. This year, we recently made a change to the rules to include information from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to look at conditions that contribute to asthma outcomes and other relevant health indicators. So this is the first year. We just recently finished 2022, the inspections for this round, and we are in the process of issuing underlying condition orders for approximately 75 buildings. Just going back to the criteria, buildings 3 to 5 units must have at least 50% of their units have at least one mold or leak violation. Buildings 6 to 9 units must have at least 25% of the units have mold or leak violations. And buildings that have 10 units or more must have at least 15% of the units have such violations. Owners that get selected for this program receive a notice as well as the underlying conditions order. And what they're required to do is they have 4 months to hire a registered architect or professional engineer to inspect their building, look at all of the violations, and determine whether or not there is a system needed and what the underlying cause of the violations are. The architect or engineer must then submit their report as well as a number of affidavits to the underlying conditions program. Once we get a sufficient report and all the required affidavits, the owner then must apply for a dismissal request inspection and correct at least 80% of all the open mold violations. We did not due to COVID, we did not select buildings in 2020 and 2021, but like I mentioned, we just finished the inspections for 2022. Not including this current year, there have been 444 buildings selected and 407 buildings discharged. We did a report in 2000 and, hold on. Yeah, we looked at a report in 2019, and we found that a majority of the buildings that went through the program did not have reoccurrences of mold and leak violations.
What percentage was that?
No, just I don't have the exact percentage, but we could get it for you. But we had looked at this in 2019 to study the effects of it, and it was overall pretty successful.
Helpful. That's exactly what my next question was about folks that were going through this program on a repeated basis. And so similar to my line of questions before about AEP, underlying conditions that are not corrected, do they then face a higher, tougher enforcement program?
So what will happen is AEP is more stringent than underlying conditions, because with underlying conditions, we're issuing an order to the owner and basically telling the landlord or owner, you have to hire a professional to tell us what the underlying condition is. AEP, when we issue an AEP order where the owner no longer has the opportunity to hire their professional, it's now the construction project manager who oversees the building, who determines what the underlying cause of the violations are. So there are buildings that get UC and they don't comply, and then on January 31st, they get picked up for AEP. And once an AEP order is issued, the building gets discharged from UC because it now has the AEP order.
Thank you so much. That is very helpful. You're off the hot seat for a second. Okay, that's very helpful to understand, and that was my last question, which you answered, is about the Venn diagram between those two programs. So moving to housing litigation, this has been an area I've had a lot of questions about. So there seem to be endless opportunities for HPD to pursue housing litigation, to force the correction of issues, to recuperate charges and fees, and et cetera, et cetera. So when does HPD seek housing litigation?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember. So the Housing Litigation Division is part of the Enforcement and Neighborhood Services Unit. So our quote-unquote clients are all of these programs that we've been discussing. So most of our referrals do come from these units, from the AEP unit, from the UC program, from the Anti-Harassment Unit, from the Emergency Operations Division. And the Housing Litigation Division brings a host of different types of cases. The majority of our cases are what we call comprehensive cases, which is where we sue an owner for the correction of all of the violations in the building, as well as civil penalties. And our goal is to obtain an order to correct from the court, so we can get the clock starting to run for the owner to correct those violations and kind of move forward from there, because our primary goal is always to get the violations and the conditions corrected as quickly as possible. We also seek warrants for access. We receive those referrals from our emergency operations divisions when they are seeking to do emergency repairs and either the owner has refused access or we can't otherwise obtain access. We have to go into court to seek an order for the contractors to be able to access the building or the unit in order to make those emergency repairs. We also bring cases against owners where they have a high number of false certifications of violations. In those cases, we do seek penalties for those false certifications. We also initiate 7A actions. Obviously, during this time of year, we have a tremendous number of heat and hot water cases, which we do in rounds in housing court. And finally, HPD is a statutory party to all tenant actions in housing court. So we are a party to all of those.
And if I may, I also want to point out that Marty's team, the HLD team, works closely with community groups and advocates who want to initiate their own 7A, who initiate their own group tenant actions on cases. Often our attorneys are working with those attorneys in terms of speaking through if we have a case and they have a case, to understand the perspectives of each. Obviously, tenant advocate attorneys are advocating for their clients and their tenants for things that maybe HPD is not involved with. Our attorney's goal is to get those conditions corrected as quickly as possible for the safety of the tenants. So it's not only our own, and you heard the long list of programs that Marty's unit supports. And really as a next step to some of these programs to make sure that orders are enforced, vacate orders as well, those types of things to make sure that owners are moving forward when any of these programs identify that they're trying to stand in the way of making repairs or having the repairs made.
Thank you so much, and it's really helpful to hear you describe that goal, right? The goal is to improve the conditions. So are there metrics you can share about, okay, AEP didn't work, or underlying conditions didn't work, but when we took the building to housing court, X percent within X time frame, we're able to see improvements. Do you have information of that sort?
I would say that it's very difficult to call which input is really the driver to make someone take an action. We track how many violations get closed as a result of our housing litigation cases. Often, one of these other programs will provide a little bit of a push, and then HLD will provide the final push to get it over the line. I don't know that we can separate out which is the bigger driver of that improvement, but I think, and especially in anti-harassment cases, I think that where we have done some work to look at building portfolios, that has been a huge effort between the anti-harassment team and the housing litigation division to move things forward together and really kind of jointly get that response from the owner that we're looking for.
Got it. Thank you. And look into that and let me know. Let us know. So the reason that I led with that question is because, of course, one document that I've seen multiple times and is cited often is the very extremely low rate of collection by the judgment enforcement unit within the agency. With rates, I think the controller's audit was from 2016, and we saw rates of collection of those judgments at 2% and 3%. So that's not our, that doesn't seem to be HPD's metric of success. It's about the repairs. So let us know, what metrics you do have on that front. But on the judgment enforcement unit's rate of collection, can you speak to present day? 2016 was.
Yeah, and again, I'll start off to just go back to something that I said before to Councilman Member Aviles, I think, was the one who raised the question, right? Our collection rate, again, in cases, I think, where we have a court order with an owner who has participated in the case, I would say is fairly high. Again, I don't have the numbers with me today, but we can look at that. What we tried to talk with that auditor about was these kind of judgments where the request for the default penalty is extremely high. And then when the owner eventually comes in and provides some evidence that conditions were corrected, that judgment is reduced. And so if you use that huge $2 million judgment as the denominator in making that percentage, it doesn't really make sense in the long run, right? So what we're really looking for is what is the collections on the cases where we have someone in court doing that work with us. And we can look at that certainly and get back to you, Council Member.
Great. Thank you so much. And one more question, and this is hyper-specific to the Assistant Commissioner's division. How is your staffing? Are you short-staffed within the litigation division?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember. Yes, we do have quite a few vacancies on the attorney lines currently. We are doing everything in our power to fill those lines. It has been challenging. And so we are down, I think, approximately around the 20% for attorneys. But again, we are making all of our efforts to fill those lines.
All right, thank you so much. Scanning my document here. No way, I have to have more questions. Of course I do. Okay, so thank you so much. So DOB, moving to the Certificate of No Harassment program.
Most of the Certificate of No Harassment program falls under the Housing Litigation Division as well. I'm glad to have Guillermo at the table as well, but your questions might actually go to us, So,
All right,
feel free to
I will
punt.
defer to whoever has the answer. So, I mean, just to get right to it, right, there was a pilot program for the Certificate of No Harassment. We are concerned that, especially in gentrifying communities, but in more communities than just the gentrifying ones, there are owners that are using construction as harassment, right? So the question is, what outcomes has the pilot program achieved, including whether property owners have been deterred from continuing to harass? What outcomes have we seen from the program, from the pilot?
So I think that's for HPD, so I will turn it to Marty.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner, or Council Member, sorry. So as you know, the initial pilot program was implemented in 2018, and we just recently, the legislation was amended late last year, and we ran our second iteration of the pilot program, the building list, in June of this year. We did submit a report to the council last year. It was a little difficult to really analyze the success of the program based on the number of applications that we had received at the time of by the end of the initial pilot program, which was a 3-year period, mainly we think due to COVID. Currently, we have received a total of 71 applications since 2018. 31 of those applications received grants. 13 of them have been denied, and 2 of those went to trial, to a full hearing at oath, and those denials were a result of those hearings. 11 of them did settle once we brought our proceeding at oath. 19 of the applications have been withdrawn, and that can only happen prior to HPD making a final determination. 2 of the applications were rejected for insufficient documentation, and we currently have 6 pilot program applications pending. We continue to look at all of the outcomes from these applications, and we look forward to doing further analysis of the success of the program.
Can I just ask you to expound upon what some of those statistics really mean? So what does it mean when a case settles? So 11 settled, what does that mean?
So what happens is when we receive an application, HPD conducts an investigation. So we go to the building, we look at all of the conditions, we speak with tenants, we speak with them about their experiences during the prior inquiry period, which is a period of 5 years, any experiences they've had with harassment in the building. We do a whole host of other research looking at other agency data. We speak with community groups who have knowledge of the buildings, and the investigator issues their report. It is reviewed by an attorney who makes a determination as to whether or not there's reasonable cause to believe that harassment did in fact occur during that 5-year period for the pilot program. And if they do make that reasonable cause determination, then we issue an initial determination of cause. And at that point, we commence a proceeding at oath at the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. And at that point, an application can no longer be withdrawn because there has been a determination made, and we move forward with a hearing, but the owner does have a right under the statute and the rules to settle without, it saves them some time as far as getting the denial. They only can settle with a denial, but it just starts the clock ticking for them to have to wait 5 years to either reapply, or they can begin a process to engage with the agency on a cure.
Thank you so much for that. And would you say that after a building is told, or whatever the process is for them applying for the CONH, after they do that, have you been able to tell whether complaints about harassment have decreased?
In a particular building?
In a particular building.
Sorry, just to clarify, this is just after the application has been submitted, not after a grant or denial?
Both. Either case, yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned, once an application has been filed, we are actively reaching out to tenants to hear from them, both current and former tenants. So yes, we're getting whatever complaints they have, we seek them out. If an application has been granted, and the CONH thus goes forward, and an owner can then obtain the permits from the Department of Buildings for the specific types of work that it requires a certificate. If we do receive complaints of harassment, we do investigate those, and there is a mechanism under the statute for us to rescind a certificate of no harassment based on an investigation of any harassment that may be found.
I'd love to follow up, just because I see some of my advocates shaking their heads about outreach, and about whether HPD is able to go in and speak to tenants. So I'd love to have more information on what that looks like, what, the before and after, right? The if then, if an owner does this, then HPD is able to enter a building and speak, and then, so on and so forth, what you just described with that process, okay?
So what happens, if a certificate of no harassment has been granted, the only time we would follow up with tenants about harassment is if they contact us. And they would have, the investigators' information who they can follow up in. They can also file complaints with 311. But that would then kind of trigger our looking further into any allegations of harassment. And then we would also follow up with the owner to find out what's happening from them.
Great. Okay. Now my closing questions, I promise, and then we'll go into public testimony. By the way, my 4-month-old is downstairs and he's been sleeping the whole time, and I just keep texting my dad to be like, "Hey, is baby alive?" Baby is alive, and it's really shocking that they have not woken up, because I guess they believe these are important questions to be asked. So thank you, baby. Okay. So just, I wanna close with some additional questions that I had on the heat sensor pilot program. I'm not gonna ask these 10 questions, but let me just see here. So in terms of the way that the heat sensor program is carried out, how does the agency, so the landlords are putting these sensors throughout buildings, in the living rooms, et cetera, and then they are reporting and signing affidavits to HPD saying that, what the temperatures were, right, reporting on the temperatures. How does the agency verify that tenants have been providing access to temperature data?
Thank you, Councilmember. Unfortunately, the expert on this is our Assistant Commissioner, Mario Farino, who couldn't be here today. I will try to answer to the best of my ability, but he may need to correct me on some of the specifics in terms of your written questions. So once the heat sensors are installed, the owner, as you said, does have to provide the agency with the list of apartments in which those sensors were installed. We are required to do inspections every few weeks to ensure that heat is being provided. We do try to go to those apartments where the tenants have the heat sensors, and we go to some apartments where tenants refuse the sensors as well. We require the data to be sent to us, I believe 3 times during the course of the heat season, so we can verify that the data is being collected and being provided. I do not know if it's the inspector or it's someone in the office who may verify with the tenants about their access to the information, but we can get that information to you.
Thank you so much, and I want to acknowledge Councilmember Brewer, who also created the underlying conditions program. You are such a boss. Thank you for joining. And okay, so that's helpful, and we can follow up. I think many of these questions depend on those nitty-gritty details, so I can send heat sensor questions as a follow-up, but have some questions here around the relationship between a backlog or having a deficit of inspectors available, and then the biweekly inspections, some of these program requirements, and how HPD is able to meet those requirements. I will ask about scheduling of inspections. I received just the most complaints about HPD's inspectors going into buildings when tenants are not available, giving the landlord a heads up but not the tenants, and that resulting in conditions not being addressed. And so what is HPD doing to modernize the way that inspections are scheduled? Have you considered creating an app, say, to schedule inspections, or any other changes that you've considered making in order to streamline that process?
Thank you, Council Member. And yes, we've heard, requests for that as well. And I think it's a service we would love to provide. It's a very complicated thing to schedule for us because we always want to have the flexibility to handle the most dire thing that comes in, especially during heat season where we feel that we can understand whether a building has heat or not by going to any unit. It might slow us down to schedule those because we can go and hit an entire block and hopefully be able to get that done in a short time. Some of the other limiting factors for us are things like you can come up with an average time that it takes to do an inspection, so you can come up with an average number of stops that can be scheduled for a day. But unfortunately, our inspectors too often run into situations which extend the time needed for an inspection. And so that makes it very complicated for us to not overschedule people. And I think just as bad as leaving a card and if someone's not home and telling them, please call us to schedule an inspection, if you still need us, is to make a lot of people wait home and then not be able to come. This is technology that we would like to, look into and really would require a lot of work, but we understand the benefit of it. And so something for us to just try and figure out how to address tenants' needs to do that. And again, as I said, when we go and tenants aren't home, we leave a card and ask them to call us. We send a letter as well, both on the code inspection side and on the emergency repair side, to try and get in contact with as many tenants as we can when we need to do those inspections.
Thank you, and I look forward to working more with you all on that. Just in a closing question, and this is specifically from the 179th East 93rd Street Tenant Association. They have shared with my office that their landlord, Goffman, routinely falsely certifies. There's just complaint after complaint, and it wastes tenant time. The base goal being to get repairs made and to improve conditions. Not making, I don't know myself, I don't know this landlord myself, I don't know the details myself, but a building like this, right, and a landlord like this that is routinely falsely certifying. You mentioned that proactive or that comprehensive litigation goes after it, the litigation unit goes after them. What else? What is the suite of tools that HPD has to go after these bad actors?
Thank you, Councilmember. And again, I think this is where we want to look again at the public advocate's recommendations, and we have our own ideas about other ways in order to stop bad actors who routinely falsely certify. I think, it is something that we want to look at, that we want to strengthen our tools to be able to combat, because right now there is, it is a difficult position for us to be in.
Thank you. I am in strong support of that piece of legislation. I just want to give the floor to Councilmember Brewer for a bit.
I know this was asked, I've been doing this work a long time. How many inspectors do you have? How many did you do vacancies? How many do you need? And the same thing on the legal department. How many to help on these topics? I know you discussed it before. I'm convinced that without different pay and virtual, we're not going to be able to hire anybody.
Thank you, Councilmember. If you give me a second.
The mayor and I do not agree on that topic, however.
We do
You can't
have,
say anything, but I can. You've got to have different schedules. Go ahead, I'm listening.
So for inspectors, our current head count is 257.
Okay, for inspectors, yep.
For, you said attorneys was your other?
Attorneys?
33 attorneys.
Okay. Now, what have you had at the max? How many inspector
So-
vacancies do you have?
We have over 100 inspector vacancies right now.
Okay. And how are you going to fill them?
And again, I apologize. Just to reiterate what we've said, right? We have done we have improved our outreach significantly over the past year, realizing
Haven't
where we
hired
are.
anybody. It hasn't made
We
a
have,
difference.
we have hired about 20 inspectors.
20 out of 100.
We've hired, let me say, we've hired 50 or 60 inspectors, but we've lost people at the same time.
Okay.
And so, we are moving in the right direction, not as quickly as we would like.
Oh, and you think that's because of salary or inability to have a flexible schedule, or what do you attribute it to? Because this has not been true in the past to this extent.
I think as all the city agencies have said, over COVID, the hiring freeze, things like that really put us in a behind position, and we are trying to catch up with that now.
Okay, and how about the attorneys, ma'am? I know this woman 40 years, just so you know.
We're about 20% down on attorneys.
20% down. So you have 33 attorneys now.
Yeah.
And how many, so you need another, my math isn't that good.
17 or so.
You need another 17 more.
We have 13 vacancies
13
right
vacancies.
now.
13
sorry.
vacancies in terms of attorneys.
Correct.
Okay. I've not heard any attorneys being hired by the city because people want to be virtual.
Yeah, we did just fill a couple, that's why.
Okay. And the other question is, maybe I should know this, but how many, again, it's hard, average inspections per day can an inspector do? I see them, I know how hard that work is, but just generally, what's the average per day that an inspector can do?
Thank you, council members. So it depends on the borough somewhat too, because travel time factors into how many you can do. It depends.
I only care about Manhattan, you know how I am.
Oh,
But
okay,
you could
only
do
Manhattan.
citywide.
Only Manhattan.
I care about the Bronx.
Yes, I know.
Manhattan and the Bronx are two of the easier boroughs because everything's close together. And the buildings are big, so a lot of people, right? An inspection doing just complaint inspections.
Yeah.
Inspector doing just complaint inspections can probably do about 15 inspections in a day.
13 a day?
About 15 a day
Okay, that's a
if
lot.
they're not doing lead inspections. So as soon as you hit a lead inspection, of course, which requires you to inspect the whole apartment, that slows you if you find a child under 6 in the apartment.
Okay, is lead up or down? Just curious, in terms of the number of complaints.
The number of complaints.
Nycc is doing a great job. With all due respect, health and housing need to coordinate better. You need to coordinate better, according to people who used to work for the city who complained to me.
I will take that under advisement, council member, but we definitely work very closely with the health department on lead.
Okay.
The number, I'm sorry, your question was?
Whether it's up or down in terms of lead complaints.
Lead complaints are up, and that is mostly because of the changes in the law.
Right.
Over the past several years, right? So now a child just has to spend 10 or more hours in an apartment, right? The rules have changed.
Right.
So it's hard to compare to previous periods.
Okay. I sent a letter. I'll send it to you again just because it needs to be answered about this topic. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member, and happy to follow up jointly. On behalf of Councilmember Hanif, proposed intro 243 in relation to posting space heater safety notices. Does HPD support this legislation? Do you have any recommendations for changes?
Thank you, council member. And so we absolutely agree with the intent of the bill, which is to educate tenants and owners about the safety of space heaters and how to use them safely. We just would like to talk with the council member more about maybe more effective ways to do that communication and outreach. As you may know, there's a lot of signs already that owners are required to post, and just one more sign we're not sure is the way to get people's attention to the importance of the issue. And so, we'd be happy to have those conversations.
Great, thank you so much. And before I finish with my line of questions, anybody else have questions? Before I finish, could you please commit to sending us at the City Council the relevant program budgets, crosswalks to budget codes, and capital project IDs so that we can have productive discussions during the budget hearings come the spring?
Our budget office is certainly reviewing that request. We don't have that much capital in our area, but certainly the other funding sources.
Great, and headcount data I didn't mention. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. There's a lot of good information that we exchanged today. I will very closely be looking for your follow-up letter with the more detailed information. But again, it's a priority for this council, it's a priority for me to protect what we have. Right? We're not going to make any sort of dent in the housing crisis if we're have a revolving door and we're losing units due to code enforcement issues. So thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for working with us to make it even better.
Thank you, Councilmember. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about our programs. I know that some of them are complicated and some of them are weedy, but we appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We will now turn to testimony from members of the public who have registered to testify, both in person and via Zoom. If you're joining us via Zoom, please listen for your name to be called, and you will receive a prompt to unmute. Please accept that prompt before you begin. In the interest of time, all members of the public will be set to a 2-minute clock so that we can hear from all who have registered to testify. First, we will hear from Samuel Stein, followed by Emily Goldstein, Noel Francois, and Jackie Delval.
Time starts now. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you to the committee for holding this hearing. My name is Sam Stein. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Community Service Society, and I'm a member of the Right to a Roof Coalition. I've supplied more extensive written comments, and I'll briefly summarize the recommendations from them now. The first recommendation is to increase civil and financial penalties. At the end of 2020, in each of New York City's 5 boroughs, between 65 and 85% of open code violations in rent-stabilized buildings remained unresolved for a year or more. The current financial penalties are not enough. Second recommendation is to expand proactive enforcement, as we've talked about today. Throughout 2019, New York City spent $48 million across more than 10,000 properties to correct dangerous issues in rental buildings. A year later, landlords had paid back less than $8 million of the $48 million in costs. We must be serious about both doing proactive enforcement and recouping costs. Third recommendation is to expand and reform 7A. Between 2016 and 2019, an average of 23 7A cases were filed in housing courts. In contrast, there are currently close to 10,000 chronically distressed buildings in New York City, representing over 115,000 apartments. The 7A process must be reformed to be quicker and more accessible to tenants. The fourth recommendation is to integrate Nycc into the mainstream code enforcement system. Nycc residents should have the same rights and protections as that other tenants can access. The right to HPD code enforcement and inspections, and the leverage to get those code violations cited and have repairs completed. Our fifth and final recommendation is to bring City FEP's inspection standards in line with Section 8. The city should make biannual inspections standard and ensure that city dollars are not being pocketed by landlords who do not maintain healthy and safe living conditions.
Thank you.
As I said, there's much more detail and data on these issues in our testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Sam. And can you just repeat for 7A reform, 23 cases filed, 10,000 buildings in distress with 115,000 apartments? Is what you shared? Okay, I guess thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for testifying, and I'll surely be following up with questions on your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, Emily Goldstein, followed by Noel Francois and Jackie Delval.
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Goldstein. I'm the Director of Organizing and Advocacy with ANHD. ANHD is also a co-founder of the Right to a Roof Coalition, a coalition that Sam just mentioned as well. Really appreciate you holding this hearing. Code enforcement is the unsexy but one of the most important issues to actually ensuring that residents of New York City have safe, affordable, and healthy housing. And it's a huge priority for both ANHD members and in the coalitions we're working with. I submitted written testimony. There's a lot in there. I want to particularly focus on the issue of civil penalties. We're strongly supportive of increasing the amounts of civil penalties. They're ridiculously low right now and don't actually serve as any sort of a real deterrent to landlords who are violating the law repeatedly. We also have some recommendations for how to strengthen Intro 583. In addition to what's in there already, we really think this issue that's been discussed already in this hearing of when and how are fines and penalties actually collected is hugely important. If the penalties are on paper but aren't actually happening in practice, they don't have the impact that they're intended to have. And this is an issue that we hear repeatedly as a frustration from tenants, organizers, attorneys. They go to housing court, they go through the entire process, and then the settlements essentially wind up reducing or waiving the penalties that could have been collected. We also think that there could be improvements to the language around sort of adding the watch list that's proposed to open data and making sure that all that information is transparent and accessible. What's in there is really good. We just have a few additional suggestions. And we also have a few suggestions to make sure that landlords are not able to hide behind LLCs in order to avoid the watch list, because we want to really make sure that that recommendation or that piece of the legislation acts as intended. Happy to answer any further questions. There's more in the written testimony, and thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Brewer, who has a question for you.
Thank you. You know, I feel so positive about ANHD because of the work you've done on data at the courts.
Thank you.
Does any of that data help us with inspections and some of the work that this committee is focused on?
Yeah.
That would be very helpful to have that data.
Yeah, and we can, I don't have it all in front of me, but obviously we can work with you on it. I think a lot of the data that we've worked so closely with you on helps to point to, in particular, how to figure out which buildings should be considered for things like the watch list, which buildings should be considered for expanded proactive enforcement, right? Like that data is really our best tools for thinking about how buildings need to be put into those programs. And then when we look at that data and cross-check it against the lists of what's already in those programs, I think it can help to answer some of the issues and questions you all have been raising about where are these programs effective, where are the city's sort of tools working as they should be, and where do we need to take a closer look.
So does the amazing data committee that you put together, is that still active, and is this data readily available or will be readily available so it could be used? I was never quite clear how it was being used.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different data work, so hopefully I'm going to refer to the right thing. So ANHD has the Displacement Alert Project. That is all online and readily available. It has several different components, so people can look at it in different ways, by district, on a map, etc. It's all online and publicly available, and we're happy to do trainings on how to use that data.
Okay.
We also work with a collaborative of other organizations that are interested in trying to get access to additional data and improve the city's open data systems so that we can then add that to tools like DAP.
And then where are we with, I should know this, but because you mentioned LLCs and hiding behind, which has been going on for forever. Is that addressed ever?
There's been some improvements, but it's still sort of a persistent problem. And so in particular, we think there are the sort of who owns what is really helpful in that regard. But we think there are ways, sorry, I'm just flipping to the right page, that things that could be done. For example, enforcing owner registration requirements so that individuals and their contact information is actually on file. If it's the same individuals and the same contact information across LLCs, right, then we can actually get to the people. Requiring individuals to declare what other buildings they're agents on when they do those registrations so that all that cross-checking doesn't have to happen after the fact, and requiring declarations around what LLCs people own. So we'd be happy to work with you on
Thank
those.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Next, Noelle Francois, followed by Jackie Delval and Rima Begum.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes?
Yes.
I want to begin my testimony by thanking the chair, Council Member Prina Sanchez, the members of the committee, and the co-sponsors of Intro 434 for recognizing the opportunity to make our city safer. My name is Noelle Francois, and I am the Executive Director of Nycc, a nonprofit that works with tenants experiencing insufficient heat in their apartments in the wintertime. We use smart temperature sensors to accurately and reliably document the indoor temperature during the winter months and help tenants prove when the temperature in their apartment is too low. I've spent the past 8 years of my professional career using web-connected temperature sensors to help tenants document violations of New York City's heat law and have unique insight into Intro 434. I'll be providing some additional written testimony, but would like to take this opportunity to give recommendations to improve the expansion of the heat sensors bill. Last winter, Nycc provided our own temperature sensors to 58 families across New York City who were struggling to get adequate heat. During the heat season, the temperature sensors documented over 17,000 hours where the temperature was below the legal limit from just 58 apartments. It is clear from our own analysis that a low number of heat violations does not equate to a warm apartment. Real-time temperature monitoring gives us a much more complete picture of what's actually happening inside a tenant's apartment, and we believe that it should become a more prominent component of the city's heat enforcement. Nycc supports the expansion of the heat sensors bill along with the expansion of resources and staff to allow HPD to adequately carry out the program and ensure 100% participation. With this expansion, we would like to see the following improvements. First, we believe the automatic data transmission is a critically important new addition of the heat sensor program. We're excited about this provision. HPD should use this data to affirmatively send inspectors to a building when they see that that building is currently in violation based on the real-time data that they're receiving. Next, we believe additional tenant education is needed to make the program a success. We don't believe HPD should rely on landlords to adequately educate tenants about a punitive program that they've been enrolled in. We'd like to see HPD provide a detailed description of the program to tenants along with a way for the tenants to take action if their landlord is not complying.
Thank you.
HPD
Time has expired.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I just want to make a PSA. It's really helpful for us council members to have your testimony in advance so we can read it because you're not going to I remember when I was in your shoes, you just never get a chance to read the whole thing. But if we can skim, then we can ask questions. And I'm not saying that just to you, but just to the world. But thank you so much for your testimony, and I look forward to following up.
Thank you so much. We will now hear from Jackie Delval, followed by Rima Begum and Jessica Belinder.
Hi, good afternoon, Councilmember Sanchez and Brewer and everyone else who's there. I can't quite see anymore what council members are left, but thank you for having this hearing and inviting me to testify. My name is Jackie Delval, and I'm with Take Root Justice and the Stabilizing NYC Coalition. Take Root Justice fights with tenants and community groups to demand better living conditions, affordable rents, and a voice in the policies that shape their neighborhoods. We help hundreds of tenants and dozens of tenants associations file lawsuits for repairs in housing court, including buildings damaged by fire. Stabilizing NYC is a council-funded coalition to organize tenants against predatory equity, harassment, displacement. We hold speculative landlords accountable for unsafe building conditions and neglect. We strongly support Intro 204 and 583 to increase fines for owners for multiple multi-year uncured violations resulting in multi-inspections. The current fines and the inability of HPD to collect them renders the fine negligible, allowing landlords to flout the law. These increases in the enforcement of them constitute a bare minimum of what is needed to meaningfully enforce New York City habitability law. We strongly support Intro 337, which by means of sending the tenants lists of violations will help address those violations, especially in buildings that have a long backlog. Tenants have the right to know about the health and safety condition of their homes. As the pandemic made clear, not every household has access to their building's violation, and this info will help tenants fighting for repairs and fair rents. It's criminal how much of a family's income goes to a landlord unwilling to make repairs. We ask that the council pass Intro 434. The Nycc program uses technology to monitor heating. It must be expanded and probably administer. Winter's here, the reality that many landlords don't provide adequate heat, leading many tenants to use costly and unsafe space heaters. Intro 243 must be passed to ensure electric heaters are used safely. The State of New York, through HPD, has a responsibility to ensure tenants have safe housing through the oversight of private landlords. It's clear that landlords are not keeping buildings safe and are not providing adequate heat, and HPD is not doing enough about it. Buildings should not be allowed to rack up.
Expired.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate your testimony.
Next, we will hear from Rima Begum, followed by Jessica Belinder and Danelli Rodriguez.
Hi there, just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. So my name is Rima. I'm the Associate Director of Housing Stability Program over at Chaya CDC, and I run Stabilized Tenant myself. We're a nonprofit organization that builds power, housing stability, and economic well-being of South Asians and Indo-Caribbean communities in New York City. I'm just going to go over my recommendations for some of the bills instead of reading out my testimony. So in regards to Intro 163, Intro 484, I understand the need to use technology to be more efficient as a city. In my years of experience as an organizer, some of our housing inspectors don't do quality inspections because they are overworked and the agency is severely underfunded. I repeatedly hear stories from tenants and inspectors that inspectors only spend a few minutes in apartments and ignore certain prompts to look into certain rooms or places. A general 15 to 20 minute inspection is probably now going to take 5 minutes if we were to pass this. If photos are to be used, there should be no impact to our regular standard inspection, and I do not see that explicitly written into these bills. Photos won't provide enough information on the quality of work, which is exactly where the Housing Maintenance Code fails New Yorkers, and the bill sponsors need to think about this. In regards to Intro 243-A, we are in support of this bill and ask that the bill go a bit further by requiring landlords to mail tenants a copy of this notice regarding space heater safety, and an alternative option is to provide this as a notice required during lease renewal signings. These notices should be translated into the spoken languages in New York City. In regards to Intro 337, we are in support of this bill and ask that this be done in the top 10 languages spoken in New York City. In regards to Intro 434, we are in support of expanding the heat sensor program and ask that this program like this be independent of landlord intervention.
Thank you.
For
Time has
example,
expired.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Update for everyone, the baby is now awake, so, we'll see how it goes, but they're not crying yet, so keep going.
See if I can see it. There. Is that working? Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Belinder. I'm a supervising attorney with the Legal Aid Society, Bronx Neighborhood Office. I work in the group advocacy practice, and we have a citywide practice that represents tenants, groups largely, to enforce the Housing Maintenance Code and try to address tenant harassment and enforce tenant rights. Our funding is through the Anti-Harassment Tenant Protection Funding from HRA, and part of my reason for being here today is to ensure that we're aware that this is funding that supports all of the legal services providers in the city, largely who do affirmative tenant work, to assert their rights when HPD, which only apparently has a line for about 40-odd attorneys for the entire city, can't possibly be expected to enforce the Housing Maintenance Code for everybody. We are very excited that you are having this hearing, and we look forward to working with you in the future on additional issues. We really would like to see a review of the entire Housing Maintenance Code and the variety of laws that intersect with each other to make them more accessible both for advocates and landlords and tenants, and make them a more seamless resource of legal information. Everyone has said it, at least all the advocates will say it, you can raise the fines and civil penalties as much as you like unless there's real enforcement through imposition of those fines, through the collection of those fines, and through the housing court's sort of interpretation and of the application of the law. You're not going to see a huge change in landlord behavior. And so while we applaud the increase in the fines and we believe that they are legally supportable, and our testimony kind of goes into some of the issues that might surround the issues of raising fines, we believe that more also needs to be done by HPD to enforce those and to collect them at higher levels so that they actually act as a deterrent. We'd also like to just say that we agree that the City FEPS program should be brought in line with the HPD enforcement sort of standards. And we have some real concerns about some of the legislation which is detailed in our testimony. While we believe that much of it is well-intentioned, there are some real potential unintended consequences for tenants in terms of the burden of proof with respect to the photos and privacy issues with respect to the photo requirement. We also don't want to diminish the landlord obligation to provide adequate heat, which we are concerned that the sort of information about safe space heaters might unintentionally do. And so we want to make sure that to the extent that we're going to require that, notice that there will be a strong countervailing obligation to inform tenants of their rights to adequate heat and how to make those complaints and how to enforce those complaints. And I think I will leave it at that for now since I'm over my time, but I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Thank you so much. You have a question from Councilmember Brewer.
Yeah, I'm a real open data nut. So is there any way that you use what ANHD was talking about to see where there are challenges in the future in terms of maintenance, et cetera, et cetera? Is that something that would be helpful to you? Do you use it? Do you use any data?
We love open data. We use it all the time to help us identify buildings that we want to reach out to, because not every borough has as many sort of aggressive tenants associations as we would like. We would love to see more tenant organizing as well and really strong tenants associations, but one of the ways that we identify buildings, if they aren't coming to us, is to look at the open data and look at vacate orders, to look at persistent problems with rats or other conditions that are kind of recurring on a regular basis, and then we reach out to those tenants.
Okay. So you do that on a regular basis?
We do. Not as much perhaps as we would like, but we certainly do make an effort to do that.
So are you aware of the work that ANHD is doing with the data in the courts and so on, or that's not come across your desk?
I am aware of the work that they do with data related to buildings.
Right.
I don't know that I know exactly what you mean by with the work in the courts, and so
Okay.
I would want to know a little bit more about that.
We'll follow up. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, Danelli Rodriguez, followed by Faseli Alvarez, Kelly Grace Price, and Doreen Mohammed.
Good afternoon. It's pronounced Donnelly. Appreciate you.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
It's all right. No worries. Happens all the time. Good evening, dear Committee on Housing and Buildings. My name is Donnelly Rodriguez, and I'm a staff attorney with the Tenants' Rights Coalition at Queens Legal Services, a borough office of Legal Services NYC. Many of our clients live in rent-stabilized units, Section 8 units, and Nycc, all of which are subject to the Housing Maintenance Code. For our clients, the Housing Maintenance Code is a main tool for enforcing their right to a safe home. When landlords neglect to adequately maintain and repair their buildings, the Housing Maintenance Code is a tool that we can utilize to enforce their rights. Many of our tenants live in Nycc in decrepit conditions and is consistently on the top of the public advocate's worst landlord list based on the number of outstanding violations and maintenance issues. These open violations jeopardize the safety and dignity of our clients. I also want to take this opportunity to emphasize that meaningful HPD code enforcement in Nycc buildings will greatly benefit hundreds of thousands of low-income New Yorkers. Nycc is the largest landlord in the city, and at present, HPD does not post violations, conduct inspections unless ordered by a court, or issue fines against Nycc for violations of the maintenance code. Yet, as noted, Nycc is consistently one of the worst landlords with the most outstanding repairs. The legislation proposed here today is a huge step in the right direction, and we need it to be even more powerful if these protections were explicitly extended to Nycc residents. I'm also here today to speak as more than a legal services staff attorney, but also as a former tenant in a Section 8 apartment with repair issues. My parents still live within Section 8 housing, so I have direct experience living with and addressing these conditions. I have used the maintenance code to solicit repairs for me and my families. One of the most pressing issues is the lack of heat. This issue is even more urgent now as we go into the cold winter months. Here's how it often plays out in the current system. A tenant lacks heat, so they file a complaint with HPD. Landlord gets notified, so they turn up the heat. HPD sends an inspector, confirms the heat is on and working, but after the inspection, the landlord turns the heat off or provides it intermittently, and no subsequent violation is issued. Because there's no record of lack of heat, no civil penalties can be assessed to incentivize the landlord to adequately heat the building, and a tenant-initiated court action for lack of heat is unlikely to be successful. Here we see the lack of heat, oversight, and accountability all in one fell swoop. So I think two of the most important parts of this bill are number 243 and 434, right? Specifically in 434, the requirement that HPD conduct heat inspections and identify buildings every 2 weeks, in addition of the tenant's ability to have a heat-related data transmitted from the new sensors to HPD is critical in relaying real-time lack of heat information to HPD. This bill will empower the HPD to automatically issue fines for heat violations. It will also increase the number of buildings selected for this program threefold, and we implore you guys to consider that we do that with the rest of the city. In general, the proposed legislation greatly increases accountability for landlords to make certain that they adequately make repairs and provide essential services to tenants instead of being able to merely certify they made repairs without any certifications. For these reasons, we believe these bills are a major step towards ensuring enforcement of the Housing Maintenance Code for all tenants. And please read the rest of our testimony for more particular details on the rest of the bill. Thank you, and all power to the people.
Thank you so much. And it's helpful to hear it at the dais, you know, that experience of you call, the heat inspector comes, then the heat was on magically, but then it goes away. So absolutely would look forward to working with you on that.
Appreciate you. It's a serious issue, and I really want to implore the importance of expanding this to Nycc. Nycc, they're living in shambles right now, and it's unacceptable what the city is allowing to happen in the most black and brown community in our city. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now hear from Faseli Alvarez, followed by Kelly Grace Price and Doreen Mohammed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Faseli Alvarez. I am a member of Maiden Road, New York. I have lived in Bushwick for 16 years with my family, and I live in a stabilized rent apartment. Bushwick is the one of the New York neighborhood where many tenants have to move out from their apartment. Due to a lack of repair, security, and service, it is common to see buildings with hundreds of uncorrected violations for several years. Even to the NYC Housing Maintenance Code are required dangerous violations, such as type C violation, to be fixed within 24 hours. Owner has and still have this practice of harassing their tenant by not making repair, to push tenants to live in their apartment or facilitate gentrification. That housing code enforcement system is not working. It is not uncommon to find tenants who has asked their landlord to do some urgent repair to their apartment, and the response they receive is, "The building is very old and I need to demolish. Therefore, and I need you to move." Another type the answer is, "If you want to repair, you must pay me more rent, or you can look another apartment." In the past, there was leaking in my apartment. The fire department came, broke down the wall, and found the broke pipe and shut down the water in this building. In another occasion, the toilet was leaking dirty water down to the second floor. After 6 weeks, landlord came and opened the floor, made me a big hole, left, and never came back to fix it. After 1 year of repairing, called 311, and the city came, fixed the leaking, and covered the floor. The landlord just ignored me, and that's problem. The penalty of violation of the Housing Maintenance Code are very light, and many times the housing department doesn't collect the fine, and the owner must continue to the disagreements to any repair. We say it is time to pass a strong law and higher penalty, but also to make sure that those fines are actually collected.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kelly Grace Price, followed by Doreen Mohammed.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kelly Grace Price from Close Rosie's. I don't usually appear at this committee to testify. I wanted to talk specifically today about the legislation calendared And I also want to bring in some of my own experience of living in a building that was in the 7A program that has continued violations. I already turned in my written testimony. Some of you may or may not have reviewed it. I want to quickly point out some of the legislation discussed today. I agree with everything that the advocates have already said before me, from the wonky times that inspectors show up to landlords just turning on heat at the last minute for inspections. All of that happens all the time. Specifically about the bills slated today, I'm trying to figure out why Councilmember Marte and Holden basically have the same bill with different sponsors under different intro numbers. The bill is a terrible idea to begin with. I outlined the points for why the bill is a terrible idea extensively in my testimony. Please take a moment to read it. I've been a photography professional building photography databases in this city for 20 years. It's no easy feat. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a very expensive behemoth undertaking with all kinds of privacy concerns. Please refer to my written testimony. I also, instead of going down point by point the various bills on the slate today, I wanted to point out specifically regarding Councilmember Hanif's proposed 0243 requiring multiple dwelling owners. I'm sorry, not that one. The heat sensor program, I'm sorry, it's yours, Committee Chair Sanchez. I'm trying to figure out why Class B housing stock is omitted from this bill. I live in a Class B building, an SRO, and it doesn't make sense that only Class A housing stock is participating in this building. I think it's a slippery slope, a bad precedent to start parsing out Class B from Class A housing stock when you're talking about legislation. Those are the things that I wanted to get on the verbal record from my written testimony. I know my time has expired, but I just want to point out.
I have a screaming child, so I want to get through all the testimony. I do promise to read your testimony, okay?
I just want to point out, I live in a building.
I'm so sorry. We don't have time, but we'll follow up with you, Kelly from Rosie's.
Thanks very much. Doreen Mohammed, followed by Satish Nori and Mike McGee.
I can't. Hi, everyone. This is Doreen Mohammed speaking. I've been waiting hours to testify. I'm at my doctor's appointment. So I just want to point out that we need to make these hearings a lot more publicly accessible for people most affected. I want to try to keep it as brief as possible, but there needs to be a lot of overhauling with HPD. There have been many advocates, like Donnelly was just testifying about it. So many people have insufficient heat, insufficient hot water, often no heat, no hot water. And it's like a phone tag game with HPD, and it never leads to action. People have, rodents in their apartments. People have windows with a lack of insulation. I'm one of those. And there just needs to be a lot better of a process. It's really unacceptable that our rents continue to spike, but that we don't get the services that we need, that we're paying for, or even if you're not paying for it. I just think it's just a human right issue. It's a cold winter. It's like a rainy day today. I'm growing up in New York. It's always been the problem with insufficient heat. So we saw how people need to use electric portable heaters plugged in. Has caused fires and hazards, and that shouldn't be necessary. The temperature requirements by the law are also insufficient. For me, having an apartment that faces the water, that doesn't actually meet the needs. You need it 75 degrees and higher, all the time. So I just wanted to come over here to say that, and I hope that there'll be actual true action and leadership, especially for Nycc. There's so many people that don't have heat and hot water. People went without gas for months last winter. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened again. There's just insufficient accountability from our government and our agencies, and a lot of reform needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Satish Nori, and then Mike McGee and Robert Altman.
I just turned it off. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Satish Nori, Executive Director of Just Fix, a New York City-based civic technology nonprofit that creates tools to support the tenant movement. Our tools serve to advance housing justice and empower tenants to address housing conditions and obtain repairs. Since 2016, we have helped approximately 800,000 tenants through our various tools and products. Our team of 12 engages with tenants, housing organizers, and partner organizations to help level the playing field between landlords and tenants. We also encourage the council to focus on Nycc tenants. We offer the following input on the bills being considered here today. On Intro 163, photographic evidence can be compelling proof of housing conditions. Photos are useful in housing part actions in housing court and as proof in support of abatements and non-payment proceedings. However, while a photo may support the existence of a violation and demonstrate its gravity, the absence of a photo should not be held up as proof that a violation does not exist. JustFix urges the council to make sure that photographic evidence submitted by housing inspectors does not serve as a shield, conclusive evidence of the lack of violations. If photos are to be a feature of inspections, why not let tenants take photos of the conditions and have them be part of the inspection report? HPD already has a shortage of inspectors and 100 unfilled positions. Tenants have the proper incentives, their own health and safety, to report on violations and document them. On Intro 337, JustFix acts to ensure that tenants have accurate and current information about housing conditions, violations, and resources to address these issues. Our Who Owns What platform was accessed by 300,000 users last year to research their landlords. Information about open housing maintenance code violations is important for tenants who seek to address these conditions. Tenants who need to be aware of dangerous conditions outside of their apartments but in their buildings, and by housing seekers who need to know about the health and safety issues in their prospective homes. This bill attempts to address these issues by requiring a mailed notice. However, once a year is not enough. Given the violation information is online and accessible in real time, tenants should be able to sign up for text alerts about new and existing violations in their buildings or in any buildings. Text alerts would provide such relevant information to people when they need it and in a way that most people access information. And I've also submitted written testimony. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. And JustFix is an excellent resource. My team uses it all the time, so I want to just appreciate the website and your testimony today.
Thank you very much.
I would ditto that. I'm a big JustFix fan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you. Mike McGee, followed by Robert Altman and Audrey Johnson. I believe Mike McGee is not present. We will move to Robert Altman, followed by Audrey Johnson and John T. Maher.
Thank you. Am I on?
Yes.
Am I on? Yes, thank you. I submitted written testimony as well, so I am not going to repeat what you already have in front of you. I'm just going to emphasize, I think, 2 points. I'm a little different here today because I represent landlords who are more often than not very responsible, but no landlord is perfect. So I have to figure out, how do we do something where we don't necessarily harm the landlord and hit them with these much higher fines that are being proposed? And I've given it some thought, and often we can have a situation where sometimes your bad landlords are never going to fix this without enforcement, but your good ones will. And there should be some time allowed to be able to fix a violation before it actually vests. If they don't, it can remain low. If it's not fixed within a week or two, or without some time constraint, which you decide upon, then it goes to the higher fee. Next, this is becoming something of a pet peeve of mine, that things are being added to leases and being posted. And someone did some research for me, and I can see that there are now 18 different signs that have to be posted in a building. When you have so much, sometimes you have nothing. And maybe it's time to think about what really should be posted and how it should be posted. Because such a large amount of things that get posted, I would think most of the tenants' eyes would glaze over. So how do we actually do something that, since we keep adding and adding and adding to the signage, where we can actually make it so that it's useful for the tenants when they need it, and so that their eyes don't glaze over? I have some ideas on this.
Thank you. Time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Audrey Johnson, followed by John T. Mayer and Sean Lumpkin. I believe Audrey is not present. We will move to John Mayer. who is also not present. Next, Sean Lumpkin, followed by Renata Rafi and Deborah Wallace.
Maybe texting them.
Hello, I'm Shannon Lumpkin. I'm with the Opera House Tenants Union in Bushwick, Brooklyn, District 34. Councilmember Gutierrez is our representative. And first of all, I want to thank all of you, the city council members present, especially the chair, for everything that you're doing on behalf of tenants' rights, and as well as all of the advocates who have been testifying as well. I'm a below-the-knee amputee and a Ewing sarcoma survivor, and discovered when I went through this that my landlord was literally willing to put my life into great levels of risk in order to get me out, to not start a union, to not fight against them. One of the things I want to bring up in this is that, the process of analyzing the code violations, our building has over 170 violations right now. Many of them got closed without being properly inspected, and it had to do, with the lack of contacts between tenants and HPD, the ability for us to be home on a permanent basis. But as soon as we do start to stand up for ourselves in our situation and our landlord, according to Just Fix It and Who Owns What, amazing, is associated with over 4,000 buildings. And I fear that other people who don't have the neighbor
time has
resources.
expired.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Renata Rafi, Deborah Wallace, Lyric Thompson, and Susan Berkowitz. I believe Renata Rafi is not present. Deborah Wallace, also not present. We'll move to Lyric Thompson and Susan Berkowitz, followed by Robert Thibault and Corey Ortega.
What? No, I'm going to submit it electronically because you guys want 20. Hi, how are you? My name is Lyric Thompson, and I was going to go through all of these bills really quickly, but I don't think we have enough time. So I'm going to focus on the Twin Park fire and my experience in dealing with HPD and having non-compliant doors. We've had an issue with our doors since the building was built. It was fraudulently signed off by 2 corrupt DOB inspectors who were nicked by DOI in 2015. Artan Majuko and Gordon Holder. Now, this has been a root issue that has caused many, many problems, including and not limited to our doors. For 8 years, I've been fighting with HPD over doors. For the first 4.5 years, HPD wrote and removed violations on a door that was never supposed to be installed on the building. Now, we had hundreds of inspections at that point. I can't help but think that 1 or maybe 2 inspectors should have picked out the fact that this door should have not been on the building. However, they never caught that. I learned that fact when the door was sealed shut and the tenants were unable to leave the building. When we opened the door, we realized it had no fire rating and there was a hole in our smoke-stopping wall. Getting HPD to write violations for these conditions has been problematic because HPD does not train their inspectors in the NFPA codes that govern these doors. Now, I've heard a lot of hoop and ha, a lot of excuses as to, oh, we have different codes, we have different standards, we have different blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, people are dying of smoke inhalation while they flee for their lives because HPD cannot be bothered to offer a training class that covers the standards for the doors that they are paid and legally required pursuant to Multiple Dwelling Law 50-A.4 to enforce. I have had to go to the New York Times to have the proper violations written, which were just removed just this week. Just removed. Now, DOB wrote violations this week for our door not being in compliance, where HPD removes the violations. I have video of the door if you'd like to see it. Now, with regard to videos and accepting videos, tenants should be able to submit a video if there is a violation or violating condition. Waiting on HPD to spy something with their eye is really not a feasible or a workable solution. An example would be, my building is flooding right now as I'm talking to you. If it's raining outside, my building is flooding. Now, HPD was out again. When they removed the violations on the door, they were looking at the gutters. HPD said, oh, I don't see any rain coming down, so call 311 when it rains. My basement floods every time it rains. Now, I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be ugly. But nobody has time to deal with this agency that can't even be bothered to let you know when they're showing up. I mean, you just had a baby. If I showed up at your house right now to inspect...
Lyric Thompson, thank you so much for your testimony. I believe we are at time. We are happy to receive your written testimony. Thank you.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We will now move to Susan Berkowitz, Robert Thibault, and Corey Ortega.
Hi, my name is Susan Berkowitz. I'm a tenant and I represent a building in Gravesend, Brooklyn. We have a very unique situation. We are a building that is everything from Section 8 to co-op owners, and we have 113 units. We've had 10 years of heat issues, and we are currently in the sensor program. We have been chosen this year to be in the sensor program, so I thought you might want some feedback, and I will add this into testimony. I know we don't have a lot of time. My experience with it so far is that they are relying on the landlords to put up signage to let the tenants know about the program. This does not work. It is very confusing for tenants to have inspectors coming in every 2 weeks just randomly. It's not efficient. They did put up a sign for self-closing doors because we are getting other violations on top of the ones we already have. But we have a population that is a lot of elderly and immigrant population does not speak English, and therefore they have no idea what's going on. The only reason I found out about it is because I have been in the Nycc program, and I have a sensor in my house along with other tenant who also had one for the past 8 years, and it has been generating multiple violations, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours of violations. However, I've only gotten a few heat violations. I've gotten OMOs, which has not restored the heat. And this is before going on this program this year, and all that has resulted in my building being chosen, which is great. However, the implementation of this program is problematic. Also, when they can only get B violations for when the inspectors come in and note that the sensors are not present. But I want to elaborate more about it because I think you do need feedback from buildings that are participating.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you. Robert Thibault, followed by Corey Ortega, Frank Ritchie, and Warren Schreiber.
Yes, hi. My name is Robert Thibault, and I'm a member of the 117, 127 West 141st Street Tenant Association. We are currently in a battle with our slumlord, Guardian Realty, who has for decades left residents with unaddressed leaks, mold, rats, and mice in residents' homes, and their racist employees have consistently made inadequate repairs in tenant apartments, so mold comes back and leaks persist. Currently, there are 40 open C violations at 117 West 141st and 53 open C violations at 127 West 141st Street. New York City HPD code enforcement practices are institutional procedures that create structural violence in the lives of tenants, while continuing to let property owners avoid carrying out repairs by certified professionals. For example, HPD does not provide tenants with advance notice of inspections, as cited by the New York State Comptroller in a September 24th, 2020 audit. How could any business function if they just showed up not knowing if the customer is home? It's crazy. And HPD's housing maintenance code clearly states that the term indoor mold hazard means any condition of mold growth on an indoor surface, building structure, or ventilation system, including mold that is within wall cavities, that is likely to cause harm to a person and has been cited as a violation by the department. This means any mold should be remediated by a licensed mold contractor, regardless of what class HPD decides that violation is. And
Thank you. Your time has expired.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Corey Ortega.
How do you do? My name is Corey Ortega. I'm a lifelong rent-stabilized tenant of 39 years, currently on rent strike, and a board member of the 510 513 West 134th Street Tenant Association, where this previous heat sensor bill was announced on my block because of the amount of violations recorded. Here we go. I support, the reason for my testimony, I support this slate of efficiency bills. That's what I call it, because that's what, as a manager, that's what it is, especially the heat sensor bill. I'm a person of color in a low-income neighborhood. I'm Dominican American, and let me try to humanize this experience. As a professional who's worked hard to get where I am, but have had to overcome struggles along the way just to get to work or school. As a child, as an adult, I'm going to tell you something that happened 2 years ago. I wake up in the morning, it's cold. There's no heat from the night before. There's no hot water. I have to dress professionally. I have to go to work. I have to represent clients. So what do? I did what my mother taught me when I was a child, growing up in the same apartment I live. We got some water, we put it in a, ¿cómo se dice? En una pala, pan, and we heat it all the way, and we put it in another bucket that we used to mop, and we put it in the bathroom, and this is us taking a shower with a little cup. And then at the end, you splash it all on you. Because I live in a low-income neighborhood doesn't mean I'm going to accept low standards. And I support this bill wholeheartedly because it's going to change future generations. I'm used to it now. I'm still going through it, but I'm okay. But there are going to be future generations of professionals that are going to have to go through this. These bills will stop that from happening. And with the 9 seconds that I have left, we have to then organize after this, right? I heard wonderful things from some amazing people and organizations have been fighting this from jump. Now's the time to, after this hearing, organize the tenants, the tenant leaders, the tenant associations to support Councilmember Sanchez as chair and the council members supporting this bill to pass it in 2023. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank you. Next, Frank Ritchie and Warren Schreiber. I believe Frank Ritchie is no longer present, and Warren Schreiber is also not present, so I will turn to the chair to close the hearing.
Thank you so much to our council, to my entire team, to our sergeants, to everyone who is still here. I appreciate you especially those of you who got here right at the beginning of the hearing and you're still with us. I just want to again emphasize the importance and gratitude for the discussion for everyone who participated, but the importance of talking about these code enforcement programs and what's working and what's not. The implementation of pilot programs, if we don't look back and see how they've been working, then we will not have opportunities to improve. And programs like 7A, which are supposed to be the end-all, be-all of enforcement, if there are issues with that program or if we're not utilizing it to the extent that we need to be as a city, then that needs to be revisited and we need to do more to keep our buildings safe. So again, I just want to thank everybody, and in closing, we'll just say, if you're watching, if you live in a building that has substandard conditions, please continue to call 311. Please continue to call all of your elected representatives, myself, anyone. We need all the data points in order to make a dent in the problem of problematic buildings. So thank you all for your time and energy.